Alrighty, yes, it is that time again. Today is another Retired in Korea episode, and we are rocking a light roast vanilla bean latte. Yeah. Oh, so good. Oh, so good. Yeah. For those of you who don't know, I'm Steve, the retired hobby tech guy, American expat living here in Korea. In today's episode of RIK, Retired in Korea, we're going to be talking about things that happen in Korea. And being an expat who lives here, who is retired here in Korea, along with my wife, some interesting things pop up. I did get some questions recently of asking, um, before we get into the news, how did we move all our stuff here? And did I import, did I ship my car over here? And how did I get my furniture over here and all that stuff? We didn't. That's not what we did. We ended up all the stuff that we owned in the United States, house, car, truck, guns, ammo, everything in the kitchen junk drawer, absolutely almost everything, furniture, all of that we sold. We got rid of our house. We have no property in the United States. We sold everything lock, stock, and barrel. And the only thing that we brought with us was 2 suitcases and some photos and, stuff like that. And we got on a plane. We went to Hawaii. We went on vacation for a bit. And then we retired here in Korea. So everything that we have, we started over 100%. We bought our car here. The only thing we brought with us was our cell phones and a laptop, some cameras and stuff like that. The stuff that you can put in your luggage and a carry-on when you get on a plane. That's what we ended up doing. So it was quite the interesting journey. And now that we're in Korea, we've been here, almost 3.5 years now. It's been pretty good. We've been enjoying it. I've got a lot of stuff. It's amazing how much stuff you can get in a short amount of time. It's just incredible on how we got rid of so much stuff. We had like a 4-bedroom, master bath, 4,500 square foot house on a golf course. We sold it all and came to Korea. Now we got a 4-bedroom, 2-bath, underground parking, security, maintenance, all of that stuff. And our expenses are half of what we were paying in the United States. So it's a win-win for us. And we were able to retire early. Yeah. I retired at 54 years old. And it was like, the ever increasing expenses in the United States was like, we're going to look for a place overseas. And lo and behold, Korea, we were able to do that. So with that being said, we got Terry here. Terry pops up and says, hey, what's up? Today's episode is going to be pretty interesting. We're going to get into some scuttlebutt of one of the interesting topics. And what we're going to talk about undocumented children. We're going to talk about Seoul Real Estate. Real estate in Korea is kind of interesting because there's some interesting dynamics, and we're going to be buying another apartment, hopefully. We'll see what happens. I'll always leave myself an out. We're going to talk about Doctor Strike 2.0. Are we going to see another Doctor Strike? Interesting. And then we're going to talk about North Korean propaganda because that is the one that has really got up some people's noses, and some people just don't understand North Korean propaganda and don't understand propaganda at all. And they say some of the darndest things. Yeah, we're going to take a look at that. So with that, we're going to start off on this, and it is going to be interesting. Let's just go ahead and jump right in. We'll get to the undocumented migrant children left in legal limbo as birth registration bills stall. Yes, they have illegal immigration here in Korea, as every other country, and this is going to be kind of interesting. Safeguard bills for undocumented migrant children remain stalled, leaving thousands of children without formal legal recognition. Multiple bills establishing a birth registration system for undocumented migrant children born in South Korea remain pending in National Assembly, leaving thousands of children without legal recognition or access to basic services, despite growing calls for legislative action. First of all, If you're undocumented migrant children, means that you come from undocumented migrant parents. In other words, these people came to Korea illegally without visa, which is against the law. Pretty much every country on the planet, if you go to that country illegally, it's against the law. Some people will throw you in prison. A lot of countries will throw you in prison. And things are changing over here. It's kind of, so yeah, services, access to basic services and all this stuff, that's taxpayer money that is coming out of taxpayers when you have people that aren't in Korea with a visa. They're here against the laws of the land, and now there's a group of people that want these undocumented families and people to have basic services, which cost taxpayers money. And yet these people are the same people that complain about raised taxes. Yeah, and how the economy's bad, and it's like, well, you can't have your cake and eat it too. So yeah, this is just kind of an interesting little odd thing here. These two proposals are pending. Registration, certification, and amendment of birth records of non-Korean children who are currently excluded from the country's family registry. No law has been enacted. Under existing rules, children born to foreign parents cannot be formally registered at birth, even if they're born in South Korea, as the family registry system applies only to Korean nationals. Without a registration number, many face difficulties accessing healthcare, education, childcare, and social protections. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say if you're here in the country illegally, you probably shouldn't get those things to begin with. You should be deported. I'm kind of an old school. I know I'm old. I'm going to be 60 this year. I'm not with the times, What does the old guy know? Yeah, it's quite interesting because I have some keen insight on this because as a military service member, way back when I married a Korean national, our daughter was born here in Korea. And like I said, our daughter was born here at a military hospital, and that included me going to the embassy and getting a birth certificate saying, boom, here's your kid. And yeah, there's the registry by your country at the country's embassy. Why can't these illegal immigrants get their birth registered at the foreign embassy? Their own embassies won't register the births. So that tells you a problem right there. That your own country's embassy will not help you out if you're here in the country illegally because they'll kind of deport you back. That tells you something right there. So not only are we dealing with South Korean laws, we're also dealing with the laws of other nations that agreed that, yeah, if you're here illegally, you need to be deported. So we got this problem. Yeah, this problem. And again, it goes back to the case of why should you let somebody who is in the country illegally have access to all of these things that are paid for by taxpayer funds? Doesn't make sense. If you go to these other countries and try to do the same thing, it won't happen. So is there any reciprocity with this at all? No. In the countries that, I've chatted with some people online, and it's quite interesting. Some of the countries that people that I've talked to in the countries they come from saying, oh, South Korea's, oh, it's terrible, it's bad, and yet when you look at the laws of their own country and bring this up and say, hey, your own country is doing the exact same thing, they don't even they're not even putting bills forth to do this. So you're treating illegal immigrants in your own country worse than what South Korea does, and in some countries they even put them in prison. Yeah, that's kind of a problem. I think that's a problem. The spending bills aim to establish a separate legal framework for amendments of birth records of foreign children, allowing parents and guardians to report births, enabling local governments to register births ex officio if necessary. It just doesn't make sense because these unregistered births from people who are not supposed to be here anyway. The whole thing is trying to get them to be able to get taxpayer funded services. Now, I will say, go out on a limb that if you're here legally, you can get those things. So it isn't a question that foreigners are not able to get access to hospital and social services and welfare and so on and so forth. They absolutely can. But there's a lot of rules that you need to follow. What are the odds? And again, there is no reciprocity between a lot of countries and Korea when it comes to this. So, yeah, being here illegally and then having kids born here illegally, again, it's all illegal. These people that are here illegally are not paying taxes. So that's another law that they're breaking right there. And you can cry me a river about saying, oh, well, the illegals here in Korea are being mistreated and abused. Well, yeah, they shouldn't be here. The fix is not to have them here. If they weren't here, they wouldn't get abused. And the people that do abuse illegal immigrants here in Korea and foreigners, those people are punished. So it's not like the entire country, and don't even try to bring that into the thing of saying, hey, stereotype all Koreans are mad and treat foreigners horribly. They don't. It's a very minor few. There's bad apples everywhere, okay? Especially in the countries of the people that complain the most, and you see there's way more widespread corruption and human rights abuses than. And I always find that interesting. The people that are complaining the most about this are the ones that come from countries that have some of the worst human rights violations on the planet that I've chatted with. And for some reason, they're like, they don't want to look at that. They want to try to focus on South Korea. Oh, South Korea is enforcing their laws, and yet they look at their own country and the laws that they enforce with illegal immigration is just horrendous. They actually put people in prison. They beat people. Some people have died from being illegal immigrants, and there's no recourse whatsoever. So get off that soapbox. I don't want to hear it. Terry says that they're still waiting on the Supreme Court's decision to bring up birthright citizenship to the United States. For me personally, just because you're born in a country doesn't mean that you should have the legal right to stay in that country. That just doesn't make sense at all. For example, my daughter was born here in Korea. So should she be a Korean citizen? Should she have dual citizenship? Absolutely not. I'm totally against that. My daughter was born. The U.S. Embassy recognizes that birth because I'm a U.S. citizen, and boom, those are the rules. So my daughter is an American citizen. That's the way it should be. There's a lot of countries where, they don't give a damn. So their state departments and their governments, they're not working with Korea to say, hey, you need to take better care of our people. No, they don't give a damn because they don't give a damn in their own government. That is widespread corruption and human rights abuses and so on and so forth. We could belittle that to death. The legislative process has been slow due to political and policy sensitivities. Lawmakers remain divided over concerns could intersect with immigration control, potentially encouraging irregular stays or creating administrative burdens. Again, a raise in taxes to pay for all these things. And when you end up saying, hey, you can get welfare, you can get housing, you can get this and that. If you come to a country illegally, of course, that is going to encourage people to not come to that country through the legal means. And usually the people that cannot come to a country via legal means will do so illegally because they can't do it legally. That means there is some criminal or other information that they have done that is bad enough to say, yeah, we don't want you, and thus they come over here to be illegals. And whether they're criminals or background, whatever it is bad, that being bad is not good for Korea. So I'm on that side. I'm an independent. I'm not a left or a right. I'm independent. but that seems to make the most sense. Why would you want somebody who has a troubled background or criminal background and bring them into the country illegally, not pay taxes, not do things that productive citizens do, and expect to give them social services, housing, food, welfare, all of that? That makes absolutely zero sense. It is a detractor from, it takes away from Korean society. It does not build up Korea. Like, we're foreigners, we're here in Korea, we're under visas legally, and we support the economy. We are able to pay for ourselves. There's income requirements that we have to meet. There had to be criminal background investigations to say, okay, well, yeah, you're a good person from what we see in your past because you didn't get in trouble. Those are the type of people we want. So it just boggles my mind that there are people out there that are like, oh, we should just have open borders and let everybody in. No, you wouldn't just let anybody into your home. Would you want criminals, violent offenders, SA offenders, PDF offenders, people that have raped children and the number, all of those horrible things? Would you invite those people into your house with your family and your kids? Absolutely not. But yet you want countries to do that and open up their doors and allow these people in. It makes zero sense whatsoever. Oh, we should have open borders. To which I ask these people, do you lock your doors at night? Well, of course. Really? Oh, well, would you let in PDFs and people with SA children and rapists and people that unalive others? Would you let them into your house, or if they, came without you knowing, you just kind of wake up in the middle of the night and there's 3 or 4 of them in your bedroom and hanging out in your kid's room? Would that's okay with you? And of course they say no, absolutely not. I would be, and it's aha. But yes, I digress. So yeah, the debate continues all over this. Issues drawn lawmakers and speaking groups have warned that some children are left without even a record of their birth or excluded from basic services, stressing the need for institutional reforms, that every child's existence needs to be officially recognized. And this is after the fact. This is, well, people leave their kids, and it's like, well, then those kids who their parents' nationality is from some other country, that other country's embassy needs to take that kid and put their kid into, Department of Health and Services, Child Services, whatever, and take them back to their home country. If the parents are deadbeats, doesn't mean that they should be a drain on South Korea. That doesn't really make sense if you think about it. So now you're stripping away the ethnicity of a child and you're going to put them into Korea, which is they have known nothing about, and they're going to lose their identity. It seems better to have them go back to their parents' home country, maybe extended family or for child services and so on and so forth, in their original home country, their ethnic home country. But Lord forbid we do that. No, we can't do that. Every child has to have basic service. Well, that costs money, and I understand that, and I have a heart for children, but countries need to step up for their own citizens. And the criminals that leave their children, that country needs to take those children and take care of their country's children. Not just throw up their hands, Korea, you deal with it. You spend the money. That just doesn't make sense to me, or any country. That's a prime example of poor government and a government that does not take care of its citizens. So, the fact that there are countries that are so lazy, that they're just, but it's just amazing on how that comes up. We see unregistered children, again, people that aren't supposed to be here to begin with, have long-term disadvantages, including limited access to healthcare, education, and unstable residency into adulthood. Again, this is coming from people that are like automatically assuming that these people should never leave, and they never should be deported, and their own country shouldn't take care of their own citizens. It's, instead of putting the onus for the country of where these people came from and said, hey, these are your citizens, you take care of them, they don't. They're saying, well, there's unstable residency status. Well, yeah, because they aren't here legally according to the laws. That's just how I roll. I don't know. Um, they want to universalize birth registration to strengthen access to these essential services. But again, the question is not whether they have access to these services, it's whether they should get these services to begin with because of their legal status. If you're here legally, you probably shouldn't be getting services. Same thing. Would you wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning, you find all these people in your house at home that you didn't invite, and all of a sudden it's going to be, oh yeah, sure, go ahead, take a shower here, eat my food, do this. Oh, by the way, use my medical insurance, and oh damn, I got you. Here's more money for food, money for this and that. Oh, you want to use the car? Well, here's this. Oh, you need education, school, and books. Well, let me pay for that too. There's no way on God's green earth, no one whoever advocates for this will ever invite a foreigner, a legal person, into their home that just showed up out of the blue and pay for all this stuff. Nobody has ever done that. You see people doing interviews asking, we should have open borders. And they say, oh, well, we have so-and-so from Mexico or Somalia or this or that. And would you be willing to house this person in your house? And of course, the answer is absolutely no every single time. It has never happened. So y'all are getting me worked up. Okay. Mr. Ferrithus, good morning. Hello. Quite the interesting thing that we got here. So there's really, really interesting things. There's Save the Children Korea, UNICEF Korea, and UN Relief Agency are trying to force this onto Korea to have birth registration for people that aren't here legally. They're in a legal status, and to give them goods and services and, takes taxpayer money. And it's like, well, why are these agencies pushing for other countries to take care of other countries' citizens? Funny how these groups, UNICEF, UN Relief Agency, and other agencies will not, camera instead of the clip on. Let me check. Oh, we got a, okay. Here we go. What is going on? Okay. My technical problems. Thank you for bringing that up. Yeah. Microphone problem. Yeah, it was actually on the face cam mic instead of the wireless mic, which it was hooked up and it was working. So there must have been some type of glitch, but it is on now again. So hopefully it won't drop out. It is quite the interesting thing. Ferrithus, now we can hear you. Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that. But it's interesting on how these foreign organizations that are pushing for countries to spend money on people that are in their countries illegally to take care of people and children and so on and so forth, have access to food and welfare and education and all of that stuff. These organizations never go and do the work in the countries of where a lot of these illegal immigrants come from. Why is that? Why? I don't understand that at all. It is just not something that is something that needs to be done. I'm just kind of saying. I got some kind of audio going on. I hear something. Here's some kind of audio, but it's super low and I don't know what it is. Okay. Oh, it was a little advertisement thing. So yeah, this whole thing with these organizations, they never go to countries and actually try to fix the countries or help fix the countries, help their own citizens. It's always like, well, you need to fix the problem, not the country of where these people come from. Lord forbid we hold their feet to the fire and make them a productive government to take care of its own citizens. No, it's always somebody else's job. And I think that's the thing that gets me really pissed off. It's, the whole thing is, they have a hard time getting citizenship here. Well, yeah, because their citizenship is from another country. So citizenship is not the problem. They need to go back to their home country and learn how to be a well-productive citizen in their home country. So I don't know. It's just kind of a problem that we end up having there. Ferrithus says, I'm all for helping other countries become livable so we don't have so many migrants, but that requires foreign aid. You can't have it both ways. And that's true. There is some instances where foreign aid is required from other countries to help less, more impoverished countries, to help them assist their citizens. But then there's a lot of countries where there's a ton of mismanagement and a lack of priorities for taking care of its citizens, a ton of corruption. And the thing is, it's like a drug addict. It's like enabling. Let's say if you have a drug addict, and I've worked with drug addicts, again, that I've worked in prisons. I did prison ministry. I worked with homeless people and drug addicts and mental health people, in the homeless realm, and trying to give services and all of those things, reaching out and helping the community. But the problem is when you have a drug addict and you enable them, like, well, here's money, and then they use it for drugs, and they come back to you and say, hey, I need more money. You don't give them more money because they'll use that for drugs or alcohol. You give them the things that they need. But the problem is that they are forever dependent upon you. There is no internal motivation to do better. And unfortunately, as somebody who's worked with the homeless and done prison ministry and transition inmates from prison into the real world and back into society, doing food drives and all of that stuff, it's unfortunate that the majority of homeless people is fraught with drug addiction, fraught with mental illness, and even just normal people, but they don't want to do anything to better themselves. They have settled for less, and that is what they want. They want less. They like it that they can show up and that, a local church or charity comes and feeds them, and so they don't have to work. Why should they work? So, they're living in a tent, and might not be the best thing in the world, but, hey, somebody's bringing me food. Somebody's coming out here and giving me medical, basic medical attention. Somebody's doing this or that, so why work? And unfortunately, that is the mentality of a lot of people that I ran into with our team and the people that we worked with in reaching out and working with the homeless. Unfortunately, it becomes that thing that they are forever dependent upon you. So I don't think that's a good thing. There needs to be that balance. I can't say, be on one extreme, no, we never help anybody out. We should as human beings. I don't care if you're religious or not. Even if you're not religious and you're an atheist, you should want to help people out. But on the other side of the coin, we shouldn't just help them and enable them to continue and not have any personal interest in their own lives. You need to strive. There needs to be some type of spark that says, hey, this sucks. I need to do something to get out of this. And it's unfortunate that the majority of people that we ran into don't do that. Barrett says that's all nice and well, but if you actually try to destabilize these countries, they're never getting better by themselves. See all the regime change of the U.S. in the past decades. That's true. And I wish we could solve the world's problems like that. We've done that a number of times on this stream, so it's just nobody listens to us. We have all the answers, but no one listens. But getting back to illegal immigration, I just find it funny on how you will have politicians that want to treat people who are in countries illegally better than their own citizens. And even at the point of where they don't help their own citizens,
that are impoverished. That blows my mind. I don't get that at all. And you know, you have your own homeless problem, you have your own senior poverty problem, you have your own people that food scarcities and people that aren't getting enough to eat that are your own citizens, and yet you won't vote and do things for your own citizens, but you're going out and you're going to use taxpayer money of where, oh, now we're going to help out these people that are here in our country illegally, but we're not going to help our own citizens that are in the same situation or worse. It just doesn't make sense to me. Ferris says, look at Cuba. Cuba was recovering really well after Obama reopened trade and tourism to that country. Now Trump blocked all oil and trade with the country, and they're basically starving now. Cuba has always been an interesting thing. That's absolutely true. But if you look at the overall history of Cuba and, of course, the communism and so on and so forth, it has been fraught with problems from, you know, for so long. And a lot of that came from, you know, the ruler down there and the communist guy, death squads, you know, he did that whole thing in killing, people of different sexual orientations or, you know, people of different ethnic groups. That it's just the whole thing on that Che Guevara thing, you know, that Cuba is just a crazy thing there. And within Cuba itself, there's so much internal strife going on with Cuba. I totally agree with you that we should reopen trade and tourism, I think, because that would help the Cuban people. But the problem is the government of Cuba also doesn't really like that now. So, I don't know. I think Cuba could be a great country. But the problem is the leadership that Cuba is under right now is not looking to improve their people. Like many other countries around the world, regardless of how the United States feels. I think it should be opened up. You know, you should do business and trade with them to kind of help them out. But again, you're not doing everything for them. You open up trade and have good trade deals. And so that gives people the motivation to say, hey, we're open for tourism. We can have businesses, we can have tourism, and all of that's all the jobs that come with that, and start building that country. I think Cuba could be a really great country, and it was at one time. What I want to say is that if you're messing with these countries, you can't turn around and expect them to get better by themselves. Some countries can. Some countries do have the ability to better themselves, but through corruption and mismanagement, their own leaders are not doing that. And there's a number of cases where that's true. So again, it's something that needs to be balanced, but getting off on the little detour route that we want and getting back to Korea, it ends up that, you know, I just find it strange that there are Korean politicians here in Korea, they want to give taxpayer-funded services more towards people who are illegal immigrants in Korea than they do the poor and impoverished who are actually Korean citizens. I just find that as an odd thing to do. I mean, why would you die on your sword of being a politician elected by Koreans, which boggles the mind of why these people even got elected, but some of them have changed their tune and became this way after they got elected, and I just don't get it. You know, you should take care of your own family. It's kind of like going back to the analogy of my house, my home, my family. I take care of them. But if a bunch of people came into my house uninvited and I started providing for them and not my own family members, you think there would be some problems within the house? Oh, yes, definitely. That would definitely be a problem. And there's, you know, probably one of the things in the Bible is that he who doesn't take care of his own family is worse than an infidel. If you don't take care of your own family, I think on that small level of me and my family, you're a POS. Plain and simple. And then if we expand that out to a country that doesn't take care of its own citizens, you're still a POS. There's a number of countries where they weren't able to take care of their citizens that were helped by other countries, and then they were able to do that. But there has to be the want to do that. There has to be the desire for that. And if countries don't want, there's that fine balance, that razor edge of what is helping and what is enabling. And I don't know if we can ever answer that problem. So, yeah, it's quite the interesting thing that we got going on here, and seeing and where this is coming from within the political parties here in Korea is kind of eye-opening, because we're seeing more and more of this. We haven't seen this a lot in the past, and we're seeing more of this change in mentality in politicians here in Korea that are going this route, and it's a little disturbing, for me personally. Maybe for other people, maybe it's not. So let's go from the children. We must take care of the children, and we'll go to real estate in Seoul. Because as a foreigner who lives here in Korea, I don't live in Seoul. I'm about an hour south of Seoul. If you get on the train, it's about 20 minutes. But with that, real estate has been taking off here in Korea. It always has been. I think Korea is like 10 or 15 as far as global cities. It's a pretty popular place. And real estate speculation and the prices of real estate has gone up, just like in pretty much every other place around the planet that is popular. That's what's going on here in Korea, and housing is getting too expensive. So the President Lee, who is here in Korea, he has put out some things where he's basically punishing people, Korean citizens that have multiple homes up in Seoul especially, to make it economically not feasible to own multiple homes. And so a bunch of people are trying to sell properties before May comes. Yeah, that is a huge thing. Otherwise, they're going to get dinged with a buttload of taxes. It is just insane. Which I think is problematic, because now you're punishing people that followed the law, and all of a sudden, because you don't like it, now you're going to punish them legally. Is it legal? Yeah, he can do that. Is it ethical? I don't think it's ethical, because again, the rise in housing prices is not solely dependent upon people owning multiple properties. It's because of the popularity of Seoul. And you have people like the mayor of Seoul that wants to make Seoul one of the top 5 global cities in the world. Well, the problem with that is that if you're in one of the top 5, that means that your people want to be here. That is going to drive up housing prices. I mean, look at the top 5 countries now. The proof is in the pudding. But yet, the president of South Korea wants to keep the housing prices low, and he thinks, well, if I punish my own citizens that have multiple properties and make it, the taxes so high that they're going to lose money on the deals, that's why people are selling properties. That's going to increase the supply of properties, which should bring down the price. But the other variable that you have is that Seoul is a world destination. Property prices are going to go up regardless because of that, and because of the cost of goods and services continues to go up over time in most countries, including Korea. You're not going to be able to stop that housing price increase. It's going to keep going up. You can slow it down just a little bit for certain demographics like foreigners in Seoul, which he's doing now. We'll talk about that. But yeah, just very odd way to combat this. It's just an odd thing. Matter of fact, let's take a look at this when we're talking about the real estate here. We can see a 2-year residency rule has foreign home purchases in Seoul. So in other words, what they're ended up doing is you buy a home in Seoul, you got to live in it for at least 2 years. And that is putting a big chunk. I mean, look at all those apartment buildings. 70% of people live in apartment buildings in Seoul. In Korea, period. But Seoul, I mean, just look at that. That is insane amount of people. That is insane. Yeah, that's crazy. Home purchases by foreign nationals in Seoul, in certain areas of Seoul, fell more than half after the government began requiring buyers to live in the newly purchased home for at least 2 years. So again, they did this all on speculation because Seoul is it's a highly desired city in the world. So these people are trying to make money by buying properties, holding on to them, and then selling them, flipping them. Yeah, it's a thing. The number of home transactions dropped 51% after the rule was introduced in August. The new measure applies to all home transactions in Seoul and parts of Incheon and Gyeonggi province. I don't know if this is going to apply to me because we live south. We're still in Gyeonggi-do, but I don't know if this rule is going to apply for me in the little apartment that I want to buy to rent out. We're not in the main areas that are designated as foreigners where this rule applies. It's just not all of Gyeonggi-do. So the criticism is that foreign buyers are worsening the market's instability by purchasing high-priced home for investment rather than residence. Okay. Under the system, buyers must obtain approval from authorities before completing a home purchase, which is absolutely true. They review whether the applicants generally intend to reside and require them to comply with a 2-year occupancy. Failure can result in penalty surcharges and revocation of transaction approval. So yeah, that's kind of a thing here. Similar policy impacts are also seen outside Seoul. Home transactions by foreign nationals fell by 30% and 33% in Incheon, while foreign home purchases across Greater Seoul declined from 2,100 to 14 something. The Seoul's most expensive districts, Gangnam, Sokcho, Songpan, Yongsan, recorded 65% year decrease in foreign transactions, even though they had already been subject to earlier transaction restrictions. Tougher regulations are expected to continue. By nationality, purchases by Chinese declined 33%, while U.S. nationals fell 45%. So it's been quite the interesting thing there. That driving the housing market overheating is easing from what we see, but it just seems at odds. It'll slow it down a little bit, and then as Korea continues to be a world power and they want Seoul to be one of the top 5 global cities of the world. I don't see how that eventually housing prices are still going to go up. If you look at New York City, if you look at the big cities in the United States and other countries around the world, London, Paris, the whole 9 yards, those prices go up and up and up regardless. So I just don't see how this is. They're kicking the can down the road a little bit. So I don't know. We got some comments here. Ferritha says, I think that would be great for locals. Prevents the big players from buying up blocks and renting them out for big money. Would be a good thing for the U.S. in some areas. Yes, absolutely. Matter of fact, there was a proposal in the current administration in the United States that would make it illegal for corporations, big corporations like BlackRock and so on and so forth, who have already bought up entire neighborhoods of houses. We're not talking like a company that, has 10, 15, 20 houses. No, we're talking entire neighborhoods. BlackRock has gone through, and other big, huge corporations have bought up entire trailer parks, housing districts and neighborhoods, bought every single house on the block, and everything is now a rental because people have to have a place to live. I think that should be illegal in my own kingdom, in my own mind. If I was king for a day, those things would be illegal because you're putting the ownership of properties into corporations and businesses and taking it out of the hands of the people, which is what it's for. So, yeah. Ferritha says, I heard that. Trump floated the idea when his ratings tanked, it actually came from Bernie and AOC. There's a lot of stuff that comes from Bernie and AOC that is more, it's a lot of their stuff comes from communism and socialism where they want the government to take over housing. And if you look at a lot of the stuff that they do, it's that they propose and how they eventually want to see in the big picture is not the way to go. But I think BlackRock and big organizations, banks, investment firms, they should not be able to buy blocks and blocks of homes. Yeah, they can do the mortgages and stuff like that, regulate the mortgage industry so you don't have high interest rates. Again, that'll encourage home ownership for people. But yeah, it's just not a good thing when corporations can have a corner on the market of housing, because that takes housing out of the ability for everyday people to have homes, places to live. People, somebody brought that up and says, well, how do you own your apartment? They couldn't grasp that idea. We have homes in the United States. How do you own an apartment? And in the United States, you have condos, so you can buy an individual condo within a condo building. It's the same thing here in Korea. So in this apartment complex, it has like 960 some odd units. We're able to buy our unit. So I bought this apartment, 4-bedroom, 2-bath, the whole 9 yards. And then we have some apartment fees. We have underground parking, all of this stuff. There's a management office that takes care of all these things. So the painting is done, the grounds, the landscaping, all of that is done. Trash, pickup, all of that is paid for. It's really a good system. The good thing about that is that it can reduce the amount of a unit cost of a place to live instead of building a single family home, which is way more expensive here in Korea. So again, 70% of the people in Korea live in apartment buildings. So yeah. Ferrithus says the same with credit card interest cap. A ratings tank, suddenly Bernie's campaign speeches popped up. Even before Bernie came around, I was a big advocate of, payday loans and credit card companies. They should only be able to make a few percent more than regular loan rates. When you get into, same thing with like used car salesmen, auto sales, when you can charge 10, 12, 15, 30, 40, 50% or more, that should be illegal. Payday loan places at 28% interest, that is absolutely criminal. That should have never, ever been allowed in the United States to begin with. But yet, whose fault was it? Was it the left? Was it the right? No, it was both. They both allowed it. And whichever political party has been in office, neither of them were able to get rid of that in the past. So it makes you wonder, do they really care? No, they don't. So I'm all for capping that credit card interest rate. That should have been done a long, long time ago. Matter of fact, I remember talking about that in the 80s. So again, there's nothing new under the sun. And as far as like Bernie, I can't trust Bernie further than I can spit. Bernie Sanders has never held a job. He has been sucking on the government tit of the American government for his entire life. He has zero businesses. How he's gotten mansions. He's got mansions, but he's talking about income inequality and how there needs to be a redistribution of wealth and so on and so forth. The man is an idiot, in my personal opinion. And if you like Bernie, that's fine. I'm not saying you're an idiot. I just don't like his policies. Ferrithus says, what I want to say is Trump floats these ideas when his ratings tank, but no Republican has any desire to put them into law. And that's the problem. That's exactly the problem, is that Democrats don't want to put it into law. Republicans don't want to put it into law. Trump wants to put it into law, but he can't get the support from either side to do it. So is the problem with Trump? Is it about ratings? No, because in the past you've seen where these things have been brought up before in politics, in U.S. politics, and neither side wants to touch it. I don't know, maybe because there's lobbyists for payday loan places, car loan, mortgage loan. That whole debacle was pushed by the government, especially during the Clinton administration, to make affordable housing the whole 9 yards with that, to bring the interest rate. Lower the requirements for loans, and of course that led to the subprime housing market failure and all that, the housing crashes that we've had. No one could have never ever foreseen that happening. Seriously? Neither side wants to do it. Both sides are corrupt, is what it comes down to. Faritha says, I agree with you fully, Steve, but this will never happen under Republicans. There's too much consumer protections. And it won't happen under Democrats either. That's the other thing. It's kind of like, it reminds me of the Social Security debacle, how both sides will use Social Security and seniors as saying, oh, we have to do this. Our Social Security is going to be, insolvent in, 2035 or whatever. Oh, our seniors, they need to be taken care of. It always happens during re-election years. And both Republicans and Democrats will say, oh, we need to treat and help our seniors. Otherwise, if, the poor seniors on Social Security. But yet nobody from either side brings out something that says we need to increase, the cost of, what we're giving as Social Security for seniors, especially older seniors. Back when Social Security was first instituted, life expectancy was really low. And so you had Social Security and people croaked off and there wasn't a lot of time in between. Now you have people that can get Social Security at 62 and then they live until their 80s, 90s and above. There's a huge gap there. So yeah, I think we could move that age up, but it needs to be a graduated, tiered move. There needs to be, hell, if you just took the money that went into Social Security and put it into the stock market and save people, but no, we don't want to do that. And then look at the people that borrowed from Social Security. A lot of Democrats, a lot of Republicans, and they never paid it back during that whole debacle thing there. So, yeah, both sides are corrupt. Both sides are corrupt. If Trump really wanted to do these things, why would he sign orders that killed consumer protection efforts that went up against credit card companies for charging insane fees? I don't know. Like I said, I don't think Trump is squeaky clean. Let's just put that onto the table. I don't think he's squeaky clean either. He's not the Messiah that a lot of people. There's some good things that he does. And to give you a hint, I haven't agreed with every president. So, there's that. And I've been under Democrat and Republican presidents. And of course, because we only have a two-party system and third parties are basically, the whole system is geared so that you cannot have a third party. I guess Ross Perot was close to that. And then they were like, oh, that's too dangerous. That'll upset the apple cart. And how we make money as corrupt politicians on both sides. We can't have a third party system. So yeah, Ross Perot was the litmus test. And they were like, oh shit, we could lose everything. So we've never had a third party after that. The only thing a third party does now is take away votes from one side or the other. So yeah. But anyway, getting back to interest rates and housing, we'll kind of get back off. Well, one more. We got an alibi from Terry. Terry says, they raised my Social Security 2.8%, then raised Medicare premiums by 9.7% and raised the deductibles. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. But yet, politicians from both sides will use the seniors on Social Security to say, oh, we need to help the seniors, I stand for seniors, and that's how they get elected. And it's like, but they don't do anything to actually help. But they will vote for their own pay raises, both sides. They'll vote for their own pay raises, and they'll get health insurance and health services as government officials that normal people cannot get or have access to, and they get pensions from running for just one term of service, lifetime pension. That should have never been a thing. Excuse me. And I think when Ross Perot did his thing with little signs, hey, if you look here and you see, he was pretty good. He was a businessman. And I think that just shocked a lot of corrupt politicians. The politicians could say, hey, whoa, if this happens, we could lose. There could be term limits. We could lose our pensions. We could lose all of this stuff that we're, getting rich off of. And so, yeah, that's why that whole third party thing is, yeah. But yeah, they'll use Social Security and cry and pull at your heartstrings with that, but they never actually do anything to help. Fairth says, what I'm saying is that I judge you by your actions. Exactly. He's only floating the idea of consumer protections like credit card interest caps. Big companies can't buy all the real estate. Oop, get back up there. but his actions are opposite. Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely true. There's some things that he brings up, and there's a lot of things that he wants to do, but it's interesting on how a lot of the Republicans are not backing those things. Like, look at the, cutting government waste and fraud and waste and abuse, and hey, there's tons of people that have Social Security numbers, that whole Social Security fraud thing, and it's like, well, there's a big stink about that. And people are saying, there's people that are 120, 150 years old, they're not getting paid Social Security because they're obviously dead. Well, that's absolutely true. I haven't said that. But the thing is that if I get a Social Security number, even if it's somebody that's 200 years old, I can use that Social Security number in different government agencies, and I can get taxpayer money, welfare subsidies, the whole 9 yards. There's a litany of things that you can get of taxpayer fraud, waste, and abuse that people can abuse by using the Social Security number. It's not that they're getting the money from Social Security every month. They just have the number, and these different agencies within our government, they don't talk to each other. If they did, and Johnny Boxer Rocks, who stole a Social Security number from somebody who's dead, goes and applies for a small business grant or loan or things like that, mostly grants and those things, free money. If that agency talked with Social Security and did a ping and said, hey, is this a valid Social Security number? No, that person died in 1965. Then it's like they would know that there is fraud somebody's trying to defraud the government. It should have been stopped. That's what the whole thing was going on with that. But, we don't want to upset the apple cart, both sides. But it's just amazing on how both sides are complicit at different times. But it still comes to the thing is that, there's a lot of corruption. And then the other, don't get me started. You all are getting me fired up today. Shame on you. And then this whole thing with the Epstein list. I know we're going off the highway. The Epstein list, and then now you have people that are saying, well, if we prosecute everybody that could be prosecuted on the Epstein list and the emails and after investigations, that would destroy our government. Their system of government would be destroyed. To that I say, let justice be done though the heavens fall. The system of government, if it's a good government, will remain. It's just you're taking out the bad apples. But they don't want to do that. There's too many bad apples. And the whole thing of, there was a list, there wasn't a list, there was a list, now there wasn't a list, but there wasn't really a list for a long time. But if there wasn't a list, then why didn't Epstein's lawyer bring that up and say, hey, well, you arrested my client because of this list that now you say there is no list, he shouldn't have been in prison, and he shouldn't have been killed, which some people are now saying Epstein is probably still alive somewhere. I don't know about that. Just very odd. Hey, we got Swedish Forge here. Hey, bro is back. So a lot of stuff going on. So now, let's wind this back. We'll get off the I guess the little detour routes, the exit and off ramps, and get back on to the main highway of being retired here in Korea. What do we do with the doctor strike? For those of you who don't know, a little bit of a recap. For like over a year, doctors in Korea, mostly resident doctors, which in most countries, resident doctors provide the majority of work in hospitals, went on strike. And even the medical school students went on strike here in Korea, to the point of where it had affected about 12, 13, 15,000 doctors, and then untold thousands of medical school students for over a year. That shut down hospitals, it closed down emergency rooms, emergency services, treatments, surgeries were not done. People died, people are still having problems. People weren't getting cancer surgeries or cancer treatments. People, there's still there was people that were having heart attacks that went to 7 different hospitals and couldn't get treated, and they ended up passing away. And that's because of the doctor strike, because the doctors union in the last 27 years has not increased the number of doctors. Even though they're overworked or overburdened, doctors in big hospitals are seeing up to 120 patients a day, and the average patient, by the own doctors union's records, say is only 3 to 4 minutes per patient. I don't know, could things be missed in 3 or 4 minutes? I don't know, I'm going to go out on a limb and say yes. But it is definitely proof that the medical system is overworked here in Korea. And the doctors union didn't provide any ways or any solutions of saying, hey, here's how we can alleviate all this overburden. But they didn't. They just said, we don't want any new doctors, because it was all a political strike. It's all political lines. So as we have political problems in the United States and other countries, Korea has political infighting as well. And it wasn't over like, oh, we're going on strike because we're not getting paid enough. I could totally understand that. The majority of hospitals are for-profit hospitals, and that wasn't the point of the doctor's strike. It was all a political thing. So this last doctor strike that we had, that just over a year, it is over, it is finished, because the last president wanted to bring in 3,000 more doctors across 100 teaching hospitals, and medical schools and so on and so forth. So it wouldn't be a huge it wouldn't be a super huge drain. But yeah, the doctors union says, no, we can't do that. People ended up dying, passing away because of bad decisions. And even the doctor union president, who recently stepped down and retired and said, hey, all this bad stuff that happened to the Korean people who couldn't get treatment and passed away and because of the stupidity, I didn't know it was going to happen. My bad. And he retired. He said he didn't think it would happen. But every single time in the last 27 years that they've gone on strike, good Korean people and foreigners have been victims of this. But he's like, my bad. Yeah, I'm just going to go retire. So now the residents came back, not all of them. Some of them just quit. And then medical school students that didn't go to school for a year, they have to make up that year. The residents that left for a year have to redo that year of residency. So we're not, even though the strike's over, we're not even at pre-strike doctor levels. We're below that because thousands of resident doctors said, screw it, I'm not going to be a doctor. And then we have the backlog of now these medical school students need to redo that year. So we're actually going to be 2 or 3 years before probably about 3 to 5 years before we get to pre-strike doctor levels. So what happens now? We could have a doctor strike 2.0. Well, maybe, I hope not. Good Lord, seriously. Let's take a look at that. This is absolutely crazy when we take a look at this. South Korea to add 3,342 medical school seats outside Seoul by 2031. The last administration only wanted 3,000, and the doctors union went on strike. So it'll be interesting to see. And again, the last 27 years, the doctors union has always gone on strike. So we'll see what happens with it. I'm crossing my fingers that hopefully the heavens will open up, God will step down and put some common sense into people, and they'll actually let more doctors into Korea, and then there won't be a strike. Because every strike, people don't get treatment. They don't get cancer surgery. Children die. Pregnant women have complications and they die, and it's just bad. Every single doctor strike has resulted in tragedy. So when I saw this, I was like, holy crow, are we going to go through this again? Because again, 27 times in a row, the doctors union has gone on strike. And now the current administration, like I said, hopefully the heavens open up and everything changes. President Lee announces gradual medical quota hike despite lingering resistance. This is almost verbatim of what happened besides it being a new president. The lingering resistance, getting resistance. Yeah, we don't really want to do this. The government says it will add over 5 years in efforts to ease doctor shortages outside the Seoul metropolitan area, which is exactly what the previous administration wanted to do, was just add 3,000. So, yeah, it's not looking good for the home team. According to the Ministry of Health and Welfare, medical school quotas outside Seoul will be expanded gradually, rising from 490 to those increases. Incremental expansion is intended to limit pressure on training capacity. On the total increase will be allocated to those numbers, additional 400 seats to newly established public medical schools and regional medical schools between 2030 and 2031. The government estimates the new plan will yield 3,500 additional doctors by 2037. Again, it's still woefully deficient, but yeah, it is. This isn't going to work. I hope it works, but I don't think it will. It says the students admitted through the expanded quota will receive government financial support, so they're going to help them become doctors, but they're going to be required to work in regional medical institutions for 10 years after graduation. This was kind of the same thing that the previous administration ended up saying, and the doctors union that has gone on strike every single time for the last 27 years. You see why my hopes aren't hopeful? Yeah, it's that. The ministry finalized plan was voted on and passed after 7 rounds of discussion with doctor and patient groups, which is kind of the same thing that happened last time. Following the release of supply and demand projections by the Physician Workforce Projection Committee. Again, this is all lather, rinse, repeat from last time. Medical school quotas have reduced gradually since 2000 following the introduction of separation of prescribing and dispensing medicines, and were fixed at 3,000 seats by 26. The quotas sharply expanded to 5,000 before readjusting to those numbers. It kind of gets adjusted, but yeah, anytime there's been a call for more doctors, the doctors union always goes on strike, and every single time in the past 27 years, the government has always bent their knee and folded. Based on supply and demand, blah, 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 blah. The ministry said the allocations, so detailed quota allocations for each of the 32 medical schools outside of Seoul will be announced in April following a deliberation. Doctors, support measures for medical education regional doctors. Part of this stems from how Korea is recently, right now everything revolves around Seoul. Seoul National University, medical, the whole 9 yards, business. Seoul is the place to be. And for most Koreans, you have arrived and you have become successful when you go to Seoul. You get a job in Seoul, you do that. But now Korea is kind of trying to shift away from that, and they're trying to make like business hubs in different parts of Korea to get away from that. So they're trying to revitalize some of these outside areas, and this is another way that they're trying to do it. Of course, this has also been tried in the past, and it's failed. So again, I will just have to wait. I'm not going to hold my breath on this one. So yeah, it'll be interesting. They want to strengthen facilities, facility capacity, and of course, regions and areas for hospitals out in the sticks and smaller towns and cities and so on and so forth. Because usually big medical hubs are in the couple of big cities, Seoul, Busan, things like that, or Busan, however you want to say it. I remember back in the day it was Busan, but now everybody says Busan. So yeah, it has always been a thing, but now they're trying to revitalize because you have a declining population in smaller towns and cities, and everybody wants to go to Seoul, and so towns are running out. And so the tax base is going, you're going to have a lack of goods and services, for those cities and towns and areas and regions, especially if you're out in farming areas and old farming towns and communities and cities, or towns, I should say. there's not enough people to keep the infrastructure. There's not enough tax base to keep the infrastructure going. So that's part of the plan of what Korea is doing, is going to these different areas throughout Korea and to revitalize that. And part of this, again, is kind of like doing the doctors thing. Let's increase the doctors and make them work 10 years. I don't know. Students will be given more opportunities for clinical training at both university hospitals and local clinics. Government plans to revise regulations to restrict regional universities from conducting clinical training outside their designated areas such as Seoul. It's going to expand funding for research and development, blah, blah, blah. It will prepare a comprehensive plan to strengthen the role and capacity of national university hospitals, stressing that all 10 national university hospitals are currently building advanced technical education and training centers. It will review measures to ensure smooth eligibility for national licensing exams for students admitted, blah, blah, blah. Most students enrolled in those 2 years anticipated in a mass walkout during the Yoon Suk-yeol administration when medical school quotas were increased. And again, it's the last 27 years, they've never done anything. The regional doctor system will apply to medical schools in 8 regions outside of Seoul. So those areas there, which is, again, it's kind of that thing to expand out and not make everything dependent upon Seoul, try to make these other areas more desirable. And there are also devised incentive measures to encourage doctors to work in these regional areas. Those specific details were not immediately disclosed. Again, this is a lather, rinse, repeat of what we just went through in the last administration and previous times where they tried to increase the number of doctors. All of this is so similar, it's not even funny. The government will increase the use of contract-based essential doctor programs, hiring senior physicians and expanding through artificial intelligence-based remote medical services to address regional shortages. This thing was actually brought up a long time ago of doing telemedicine. And during the last strike, the other side was saying, hey, we need these places that are these rural areas and things like that. We need to have more doctor services. And they proposed, hey, let's do telemedicine. What did the doctors union say? Nope, can't do that. That will destroy our medical system. How shame on you. How? If I sit physically in front of a doctor and tell them my symptoms and so on and so forth, what is the difference between me going and doing like what we're doing here, FaceTiming for things? Doesn't make sense. If I tell the doctor, yeah, I need a refill in medications, yeah, I'm doing fine, blah, blah, blah. The doctor says, hey, okay, well, here, 5 minutes, I'm in and out. I can do that remotely, and I don't have to travel an hour, 2 hours to get to a hospital to go to an appointment to get a refill in medication, which every single month I have to do, unless you go to the big hospitals in Seoul. Every 30 days, you got to go to the hospital to get one medication. So if I get a medication for my back, if I get a medication for my stomach, if I get a medication for mental health and another medication for that, that's 5 different appointments that I need to do every single month to get refills on my medications. The medical system needs to be streamlined. It needs to be fixed, but the doctors' union doesn't want to do that. Ferris asks, well, what does the union that went on strike want? Just more money? No. They were quoted as saying, the head of the doctors' union, a representative, one of the 2 big representatives, went on Korean national news and they were being interviewed and said, well, why shouldn't we have more doctors? Both of these representatives, copy-paste, said the same thing. It would lessen the prestige of doctors that we currently have. And they can't accept that. No mention of pay whatsoever. It said there's only so much prestige, and if we hire more doctors, that will mean less prestige for the doctors we have, and that's not acceptable. My wife and I heard that, and we're like, you, what? It wasn't about money. It wasn't about money at all. It was just, oh, you want more doctors? No. It was like a spoiled toddler. That is exactly it. And he said, well, you're complaining about being overworked, working 36-hour shifts, seeing 120 patients a day. We have backlogs of appointments that keep getting longer and longer as we have a super age society. Why don't we do telemedicine? Doctors Union response was, no, that will destroy the medical system. Okay, the government wants to increase the number of doctors to lessen the burden that current doctors have because they're overworked, and you have people that are quitting being doctors because of the overwork. And you don't want to do telemedicine. Why don't you want more doctors? If you had more doctors, that would mean you spread out that burden of work over more people, which means you wouldn't have to do 36-hour shifts, right? You wouldn't have to see 120 or more people a day, right? Doctors Union says, no, that would destroy the medical system as we know it. And it's like, well, how? They're not lowering the standards to become a doctor. It's the exact same standards for them as the doctors that we have now. So how would adding more doctors, and again, in previous videos I talked about this with the last strike, adding 3,000 more doctors would mean like maybe one extra doctor per clinic, So in a hospital, you've got back, you've got intestinal, you got this and that, the different, psychiatry. You might have one extra doctor per section. How's that going to destroy the medical system as we know it? Same qualifications, same certifications, same education, same residency requirements. Just add one more doctor to each specialty to help with the burden. Doctors Union said, no, we can't do that. That will destroy the medical system. I'm at a loss. While I love Korea and the Korean people, I just think that is the most asinine thing I've ever heard. Here we're going to get to this. This is getting kind of interesting. Let's get this. The issue remains politically sensitive. Again, the key word being political because it has always been political. Sensitive following unprecedented walkouts by more than 10,000 medical interns and residents in 2024 and wide class boycotts by medical students sparked by the administration plan for sharp enrollment increase. Again, he did the same thing, but he wants to do it on a smaller scale. But the doctors union in the last strike and in previous strikes says that we will never increase the number of doctors. And they haven't done it for the last 27 years. So I'm going to go out on a limb and say that if I was a betting man, I'm going to bet says, I remember the hardship faced by doctors and the public in the past due to conflict surrounding the expansion of the number of physicians. It is meaningful that today's expansion was decided following deliberations from that's the same committee that was used last time. So I don't know. The government will continue to communicate with the public and physicians. However, the Korean Medical Association protested the decision. Again, the Korean Medical Association is the doctors' union. Walking out of Tuesday's meeting and boycotting the vote. Right there. There it is. Says it all. There. Are we going to have another doctor strike 2.0? They protested it, as I knew they would, because they have for the last 27 years. When your own country When your own Korean Medical Association, the doctors union for your country, says no, and they walk out and boycott the vote, they've done that for the last 27 years. I don't have much hope. I think we'll see another doctors' strike 2.0. Faritha says, instead of flat out saying 2,000 more spots for doctors, why not expand the quota in areas that need more doctors? Their argument is really weird. Yeah, and it doesn't matter because previous administrations prior to the last administration, again, going back over 27 years, no, it's always been no. We don't want to increase. We don't want to do that. Why would the Doctors Association for Korea that obeys the Hippocratic Oath, they do the Hippocratic Oath here, do no harm, treat the patient, the whole 9 yards. That is an oath that they take, and they're like, no, we don't want to treat people out in the country. No, we don't want to treat smaller towns and cities. No, we don't want an increase. We don't want an increase because of a super age society that Korea has become, requiring that has resulted in more doctor's appointments for everybody as they get older. The largest segment of Korea is now aged, super aged. But no, we still don't need more doctors. And even when Korea was bursting and building and tons of babies were being born, there was a huge influx of children, the lack of pediatricians, and still it was brought out that the doctors union, hey, we need to hire and have more pediatricians because, we're having a lot of kids and kids need medical help. And the doctors union, you know what they said? They said, no, we can't do that. We will not do that. And they walked out and boycotted the vote. Every single time. They have done exactly this. It doesn't matter if it's spread out over time, an increased quota of doctors, medical school slots. The doctors union has always said no. It doesn't matter if they say, hey, you're going to get paid more. The doctors union always says no. It doesn't matter if it's whatever the reason is. All good reasons. You're by the doctors, the Korean Medical Association's own records of them saying that they are overworked. No, we don't want more doctors. And here's the other damning thing is that they never come up with any solutions, alternative solutions. It's just no. We can't have more doctors. That would ruin the prestige of doctors. Talk about old school mentality, archaic mentality. That's what it is. That's truly what it is. It is for the last 27 years. It just amazes me that this is even a thing. And when you talk, my daughter's a doctor. We've been talking with her and relaying this information about the doctor strike here and talking with some other people in the medical profession. They're dumbstruck. It is, and I've talked with people who are in medical from different countries that aren't the United States. And they're like, what the hell is going on with Korea? And I'm like, I don't know. I'm kind of asking you, have you ever seen this? And they're like, oh, hell no. Talked to a doctor that came from the UK, London, and another one from, was it Ireland? And what was the other country? Spain, I think it was, or somewhere close to Spain or somewhere. But yeah, no, never, ever heard of this. And they're like, what the hell's going on? In the United States, you might do a 24-hour shift. On call, I mean, it is insane. The amount of on-call time that they do. It is just, nobody could survive and have a good mental health and take care of themselves and have a good mental health in working the number of hours that they do. But it's what they do. Fairness asks, what did the doctors themselves say? They go on strike because the doctors union says so. And they're so group-minded, follow the leader, let's follow the sheepdog, and the sheepdog will tell us where to go. The leader will tell us where to go, and we just follow and nod our head yes. and they put up with it. There's doctors that when this last strike that we had, we're talking about, well, the people need doctors. I don't think it's right that we should go on strike. Those people were punished for it. They're blacklisted and so on and so forth. And the Korean Medical Association has such a stranglehold on these for-profit hospitals that basically they could end up saying, hey, don't hire this guy, fire this guy. And so the doctors, if you want to be a doctor and that's your lifelong dream, you just need to put up with the bullshit. Because if you go against the grain, you won't be working. Yeah. And then the Korean Medical Association, their power and outreach was such that they even got the medical school students to go on strike. The medical schools basically shut down for a year. Nobody went to school. And the rumors going around were that, well, if you are a medical school student and or you are a doctor or a resident doctor and you want to continue going to school or you want to continue working as a doctor, it'll be very detrimental for you. Yeah, you don't want to do that because you won't be a doctor for long. And that is why, that's why it was like, they say it was 10,000 in this article, is more like 12 to 13,000. Didn't work. And that it might be 10,000 residents, but then you also had the senior doctors that supervise the resident doctors. They call them professors here in Korea. They reduced their working schedule to like half, sometimes even more. They didn't take a cut in pay, but they cut the number of hours that they worked. So it's corrupt as the day is long. So yeah, what did the doctors say? Well, yeah, there's people that disagreed with it, and there's some that are no longer doctors because they didn't toe the line of what the Korean Doctors Association said, the Medical Association. And again, the last guy who was in charge of the Korean Medical Association, he retired, and when it's like, well, Korean people died because of this strike, because they couldn't get surgeries, they couldn't get treatments for cancer, and babies died and the whole 9 yards. And he's like, oh, I didn't know that would happen. My bad. I'm out of here. See ya. I'm retired. Not my monkey, not my circus. What's amazing is this mentality is still here by what we just read. So even though the last Korean Medical Association president retired and said, my bad, whoever's in charge now is doing the exact same thing. Exact same thing. Terry says, the medical mafia. Yeah, it is. It truly, it is just mind-blowing. Sultan says, this thing with the doctors is such a weird and sad situation. It is. It is absolutely insane. I mean, they walked out and boycotted the vote because they have said that they will, in previous interviews, in the last strike and in strikes prior to this, the Korean Medical Association, the doctors' union says we will never approve. It's almost like it's a law. We will never approve more doctors. They have gone on record as saying that multiple times. And apparently it's true. Sultan says, I must add, with last strike, they didn't really feel any personal impact. We didn't feel any it actually coincided with the surgery I needed. Everything went fast, smooth, and without a hitch. Truly top-notch. Yeah, the medical care is great. It's overworked. I got surgery on my eyes and things like that. Detached retina, and the medical care that I have gotten has been wonderful here in Korea. But the problem is that later on, my wife, and we went to Samsung Medical Center, and the problem is that they thought she was going to have a similar thing with her eyes, but thankfully it wasn't. But if she did, because of the doctor strike, she wouldn't have been able to get the surgery. So in other words, and we called to some places, and it's like, yeah, no, you're going to be backed up 6 to 8 months for surgery for your eyesight. Imagine being presented with, you might lose your eyesight, but you can't get the surgery because we're going to go against the Hippocratic Oath. We don't want more doctors, Lord forbid, because it'll lessen the prestige. We would have to go to another country to get that surgery. That is insane. And yet, here we have the Korean Medical Association is saying the exact same thing and doing the exact same thing as they've done for the last 27 years. There's people that we know in my wife's family that couldn't get medical care because of the doctor strike. There's people friends of my wife who weren't able to get cancer treatment because of the strike, and it was detrimental to them. There's a number of articles that talked about how people have heart attacks and strokes that they went to like five different hospitals. Another one was like 7 different hospitals that were refused because they didn't have doctors, because everybody was on strike. They had to close down emergency rooms for multiple days during the week. That is totally unacceptable. Totally unacceptable. And when you look at the doctor-patient ratio for Korea during the strike, it was so low, it was like in the bottom 5 of the world. And a lot of people passed away. There was appointments that we had to get that were backed up 6 to 8 months. Thankfully, those appointments were not life-threatening. It was like, yeah, no problem. I can deal with that. I don't, it's not a problem for us. But if it was something serious, I mean, like I said, there's people that didn't get treatments for leukemia. There was people that didn't get treatments for cancer, and they ended up passing away because of the strike, because they didn't want more doctors. And it wasn't about pay. Now I fear I was just lucky. Yeah, I mean, and there's still, even to this day, we went to Samsung Medical Center, and, our appointments are pushed back further than they were during the pre-strike times. So it still hasn't corrected itself. Like I said, it's going to be 3 to 5 years for it to get back to the true pre-strike doctor levels. And even then, but the problem is now we might get another strike. So that would put that out. Let's say they go on strike for another year. That could be another 3 to 5 more years added on to that. So it could be 8 to 10 years, 6 to 10 years before we get back to normal strike levels. Like I said, it doesn't look good. Sultan says, but my experience so far in medical system and other places, primarily Hong Kong, is also to some extent the US and UK has been well below par compared to here in South Korea. Yeah, that's true. I agree with you. I totally agree. But during the strike, holy crow, it was terrible. It was absolutely terrible because you had Koreans that were going to other countries to get treatments. And then the whole thing of even for regular medications, there was problems with us getting our normal prescriptions because of the strike. Thankfully, I always make sure that I try to have, 60 or 90 days worth of medication on hand. I cycle through my meds, and stuff like that, but I always try to have at least 30 days extra. And during that strike, there was problems because they're like, hey, sorry, we don't have doctors. You're going to have to go to another hospital, which is going to require, and that's what we saw is that now the overwork burden went from those teaching hospitals, went to regular hospitals, and now they're overburdened with work. And again, that pushed appointments back in the whole 9 yards. It was like, we can't. We called hospitals and we weren't able to go and get prescriptions because they were too busy because of the doctor strike. So it ripples out. Absolutely crazy. Selton says it's value for the money. It's just so high here for most things. But yeah, it's insanity. Yeah, and like I said, the quality of care is really good here in Korea. And we're not talking plastic surgery because that's outside of the wheel. Plastic surgery clinics, those are all private. We're talking about hospitals and the different departments and so on and so forth. But yeah, it is insane to say that we will never accept more doctors because it lessens prestige of doctors. We only have a limited amount of prestige. They actually went on air of saying this, and even more, on all the Korean news channels, Korean media, they're all getting interviewed, and none of the reporters are asking the important questions. None of them. Not one single reporter who interviewed representatives from the Korean Medical Association said, well, if you don't get more doctors, what is your plan to help alleviate the burden? What is your solution to fix this? Because they were kind of conveniently quiet on the medical malpractice that happens because of people being overworked. But nobody wants to ask that question. But they didn't even ask the question, what are your solutions? So the Korean Medical Association says, hey, we protest this. We're not going to add more doctors. They left the meeting and they boycott the vote. They never come up with say, you know what? That's a possible solution of adding more doctors, but we've got a better idea. So they never have a better idea. That's the problem. I'm all for working together and crossing party lines and, coming together in unity and in support of the people. But that's not happening because the doctors union has yet to come up with any solution. Now, I'm not even saying a workable solution. They haven't even brought up any alternative solutions whatsoever in the last strike. Zero. I think we're going to see Doctor Strike 2.0 if the government pushes it. Because here's the thing. In the past, it doesn't matter if the current government administration is left or right. In the past, the doctors' union has always gone on strike and the government has always folded. Always. That's why y'all need to exercise and eat right. especially here in Korea. Get all the stuff that you need to get done. Get it done now because I think we're going to have another doctor strike. Oh, good Lord. That is crazy. I highly suggest if you're here in Korea and you have any type of medications that go to your doctor, tell them you're going to go on a vacation for 60 or 90 days and you're going to need, 60 days worth of medications because you're going on a, outside of Korea vacation so that you can have some extra medication on hand. I'm just saying maybe that would be a good idea. I'm going to go out on a limb. That's what I'm going to say. If you got any surgeries that are thinking, should I get it done now or should I wait? I would knock it out now while you can because this doesn't look good. And with the current administration, the current president in Korea, the way he has been pushing things, unless he pulls a rabbit out of the hat or some angel, heavens open up and some angel comes down and changes the Korean Medical Association, their mind, and suddenly they want to play ball, I don't think it's going to happen. I think we're going to have another strike, honestly. Based off of everything that I've seen in all the past other strikes, and I've looked at it probably pretty in depth, I think we're going to have another strike. So, I don't know. My wife calls it Korea's upside down. It's one of the upside down things of Korea. Even though they have awesome medical care, this is another example of it's upside down. It makes no sense whatsoever. And I could see if you're not getting paid enough, yeah, You address your concerns, and if it gets bad enough, yeah, you go on strike to get, cost of living increase, so on and so forth, if you haven't had one in a long time, or if it's not keeping pace with, what we got going on in the world today. I totally get that. But they're not. I repeat, they are not striking. They did not strike because of pay. It was solely because they wanted to increase the number of doctors. This is going to get insane again. I hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm so far wrong. I hope I'm so wrong it's not even funny. I hope people will come back and say, hey, you were 100% wrong, and I will make an apology video. I will do that. Absolutely. But as it looks right now, this is verbatim the same things that happened every single time before. Veritha says, I'm just happy I got my 12-week refills figured out now, so I don't have to go to the doctor and pay $50 just for them to write a new script. Lines up with your blood. I know, right? Yeah. In the United States, my medications, I would get a 30-day supply, and then I get 3 refills. So I'd be good to go. And then if I went to my doctor and said, hey, I'm going to go on a trip, I'm going to need, 60 days more, there you go, no problem. I'd be good to go. Here in Korea, we had to go to Samsung Medical Center up in Seoul, one of the top 5 hospitals, to get my mental health meds because they will prescribe it for 90 days. But you can only get that at bigger hospitals. The smaller hospital, like Good Morning Hospital, they said, yeah, we can't do that because it's profit driven. And that's another reason why they want you every 30 days, you have to come in, you have to make an appointment, you have to get your refill every single month. And then there's also a thing in Korean medical is that you're not allowed to self-inject yourself with a lot of medications. So you have to do it at the hospital, which requires an appointment, which requires paying money. And somebody, so again, the way the system is made to have and accommodate a ton of people and make as much money as you can. And so the smaller hospitals are saying, hey, yeah, we don't do 60-day or 90-day prescriptions. We don't do that. You have to go to a bigger hospital to do that. So it's all profit. Yeah. I don't know if I can do that. My insurance maxes out at 90 days, but only if I go to CVS, any other pharmacy, and it's a no past 30 days. Yeah. I've got the medical insurance from my military since I retired from the military. So yeah, I could get 90-day prescription. I get 30 days and then, 3 other times. So, you're talking 4 months worth of medications where I just call for a refill. Yep, come pick it up. And then I go pick it up and I'm good to go. I don't have to go get another appointment to get the refill here in Korea every single month. But now, at least on my mental health meds, I can get those for 90 days. But I had to go. You saw the video. If you haven't seen it, I have a video where we have to take a taxi, which is about 14,000 won, which is about $10, to get to the train station. The train station is another, you're talking 10 or 12,000 won or whatever that is, and then we get up there, we go to the appointment and come back. And so then that's another train ticket. That's another taxi ride. So yeah, it was about 50,000. It was 50,000 won for me to go to the hospital, and 50,000 won. And the exchange rate is 1440 now. So it's about $35 for that. And then it's about double that so you're looking about for copay in what I pay. So yeah, we're looking about, it's $100 a day for me to go and get my meds up in Seoul. Yeah. So yeah. Veritha says, not in New York. Testosterone is controlled substance. You have to see a doctor in person to get that prescribed. Oh yeah. Which is weird. The classifications, the medical system is so far behind of what it should be doing. It's crazy. And again, that whole thing, we kind of see that in the United States. Telemedicine, what's the difference between me seeing a doctor in person and getting a refill and a prescription versus me seeing a doctor over, video, Zoom call, FaceTime, and getting a prescription filled. There's absolutely nothing different. The same information is going to be relayed. The doctor writes a script, I'm good to go. There is nothing. I could still pay the copay if I do telemedicine. So it's not like they're not getting paid. So I don't know. It's just kind of a weird thing. Yeah. And a lot of things. Oh, I'm so sore. I started going back to the gym, so I'm a little sore. Taking it easy, though. I'm not going hard. But yeah, so many things going on. But yeah, definitely here in Korea, it is quite the interesting thing that we got going on. Speaking of being in Korea, we're going to talk about North Korean propaganda, because this is another one that cooks the brain. And it's like, I don't understand it. I guess if you don't teach history in school, people will make shit up on their own and say stupid stuff. That whole thing, if you don't know history, if you don't learn your history, you're doomed to repeat it. Yeah, hopefully that is not the case. So let's move on from Doctor Strike 2.0, which I fully expect to be a thing, and we'll go to North Korean propaganda. Yeah. Unification Ministry. For those of you, the Unification Ministry is a thing where their whole thing is to try to get the North and the South to come back together and to unify. Hasn't worked. Reviews easing public access to additional North Korean materials. South Korea's Unification Ministry is reviewing plans to broaden public access to additional North Korean materials, which is all propaganda and approved by the state. There is no freedom of press in North Korea. I'm just saying. That allowed ordinary citizens to read newspapers, blah, blah, blah. They talked to an official who spoke on the condition of anonymity, said the ministry is considering launching a screening process that could lead to the release of North Korean materials previously classified as special materials. A legal designation has historically limited access to propaganda and internal publication to approved institutions and researchers. Propaganda is always a thing, and especially here in Korea, it is quite the interesting thing. Such an option was discussed with the People Power Party, which is the people on the right, Foreign Affairs. However, the ministry had struck a cautious tone, which specific materials could be made more accessible, clarifying that it is reviewing broader ways to improve management and disclosure of North Korean publications. Hasn't begun any reclassification or release. But yeah, it is quite the thing there. So basically, they want the public to have more access to North Korean publications and newspapers and so on and so forth, even those things that are clearly communist in nature. And it ends up that, we want this. And I don't know, because propaganda from North is not really a good thing. I'm going to go out on a limb and say this. History has already proven my point. And I'm amazed at the number of people that don't know their history. Of course, they don't teach history in school now, or haven't been for a long time. And people are coming up and they don't know how bad propaganda can be over time, and how it has been used to destabilize countries and citizens in entire countries. It is just can be quite the tool to help aid in dividing a country. Again, if you don't study it, you don't know it. And so when somebody like me comes along and says, hey, is this really a good idea? Some people get really, really stupid with this. Matter of fact, we're gonna talk about that. we're gonna take a look at some of this. This is kind of funny. So because I saw this on social media. So Lord knows you're gonna get some wackadoos out there. So let's take a look at some wackadoo stuff. So yeah, this is the Korean Herald that says, hey, yeah, we got this thing going on with, we want people to be able to read the North Korean propaganda, and this is the exact same time Lee promises to punish and censor conservative media. Yes, that is the other thing, is that the current administration has said that they want to crack down on hate speech that is disguised as opinions. And we've talked about this before, where it's like, well, who's going to be the arbitrator or the judge of what is truly an opinion and what is hate speech? And the problem I have is that whoever's in power can dictate what is hateful speech. And if it's against me and I'm in power, then I will most likely be biased and say this is hate speech. So we can outlaw it. We can punish people. We can put people in jail. They also went to great pains to talk about and say, hey, well, you know what? If anything is untrue, we're going to fine you. We can put you in prison. We can put you in jail. But how many times have we seen in the past where whistleblowers have come forward and says, hey, this is a thing, and people, no, it's not. And then later, 2, 3, 4 years down the road, it ends up it was actually true. How's that going to work out here in Korea? Because those things have actually happened where people said, hey, here's the thing that is happening, and people are saying, oh no, that's a conspiracy theory. That's absolutely untrue. And then a few years down the road, it ends up, oh yeah, you were actually 100% correct. If the government enacts this legislation to limit free speech to this point, you can fine, punish, and imprison people, and then 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the road, it's, oh, they were right. You imprisoned your own citizens. Can I sue the government because of what they did by fining me and punishing me, even though I was right in the end? Well, if I'm fined and punished, and the bad reputation that I got, I would probably lose my job. And if I go to prison, I would definitely lose my job. I'd probably lose family over this as well. None of that has been answered by the current administrations, which I find is crazily unsettling. That is so unnerving. So again, just kind of keep that in mind. Like that bill they passed into law to stop hate speech, that will definitely use to silence conservatives. Again, you got the left-right thing going on here again. But here's my thing. I said, why? What good will it do? It's all propaganda. With that said, is North Korea allowing South Korean newspapers in their country? Absolutely not. Yeah, in my opinion, I don't think this is a good idea. So that was my thing, is that I can understand trying to reunify. The two Koreas. Probably never happened in my lifetime or anybody else's. But, it doesn't mean that we can't hope for reunification or an opening of ties or some type of thing where we open trade so that we can lessen the tensions between the two countries. I totally get that. I've done a lot of reading. It's a thing. Yeah. There's more ways to get something done. You can get more flies with honey than shite. So I'm all for that. But the problem comes is that unless there's any type of reciprocity, and which there is not, and matter of fact, North Korea is vehemently said, oh, hell no. I don't see why this is good for South Korea. And it's interesting because in the short amount of time since this, and on other posts on social media, people have taken the stance of saying, like what this next person did, and it's so stupid. And here's what we get with somebody who doesn't know their history. So let's take a look at this. So there's the thing there. Now, then we have Tim Ryan that says, the only thing I can think of is maybe The Rock knows how pathetic propaganda is and believes it'll have no impact except exposure, which is absolutely true. A handshake with a DPRK to improve relations is my guess. I totally get that. I thought that as well, but there's no reciprocity. And it's just, That's what I ended up saying here is I thought that too, but I don't think so because of what happens when stupid people are deceived in mass. Again, I don't think there's any tangible benefits to this. They already have, you can get that information. People can still have access to it. It's just limited. But that hasn't furthered anything with the relations between North and South Korea. So going this extra mile saying, hey, sure, we'll make it public access for all the propaganda you got or some propaganda, I just don't see anything. Now here's Tim Ryan says, although I was initially going to reply that, in my opinion, the South Korean population was far less prone to fall for propaganda because North Korea, because of decades of evidence of how bad it is. Then I remembered my own situation with the Democratic Party and how much less intelligent their propaganda is. For example, we can't define what a woman is while simultaneously saying a strong independent woman can run for president. Too stupid to get a real ID driver's license or state ID to vote. And we have vote blue no matter who still going on after that train wreck. So I'm just going to S the F up and bow to your wisdom. Tim's a good guy. He's a good guy. He's not the one we're going to look at here. This is the one here. Is this Ali Han says, why would you think propaganda automatically works upon being read? I never said that. I said, what good will it do? I asked the question, why? What good will it do? And then is North Korea allowing South Korean newspapers or anybody in North Korea to read what is going on from South Korea in North Korea? No. And yet this person ends up saying, well, why do you think propaganda automatically works upon being read? This is called a straw man argument. Laughing my butt off. Just because you immediately believe something put into text doesn't mean everyone else does. Again, doubling down on the straw man argument of saying this is what you believe. I'm not going to say it just once, but I'm going to say it twice. South Koreans are already so radicalized against North Korea that nothing in those papers will be taken as real or true here anyway. That is not the point of propaganda. And apparently people don't understand propaganda. And to I replied, I never said or implied propaganda automatically works upon being read. Again, I never stated that. I asked the question, why? So that straw man argument is moot, and nothing you say after this is worth reading. With that said, good day. And then this Ali Han, says, you insinuated it. No, I asked a question. Again, this is the problem when you have public education that no longer teaches history or critical thinking. Don't pretend you didn't say it. I don't have to pretend because I didn't say it. I don't know. What did I say? Why? What good will it do? It's all propaganda. I never said that it immediately works upon reading. I mentioned nothing about reading whatsoever. I asked what good will do. What good will it do? What is the goodness of this? How will it benefit anybody in South Korea? Yeah, but apparently don't pretend you didn't say it. I don't have to pretend because I didn't say it. And then it's laugh, LAMO. I'm so sorry you're too insecure in your point to properly engage in a discussion about it. Wow, it's two straw man arguments. And then you doubled down and did it a third time saying that I said something that when I didn't say a statement at all, I just asked, why would this be good? You didn't answer or engage in a discussion. You didn't even answer the question. You went off on a tangent of saying something that I don't believe in and never said. We just saw that. Study a bit more and come back when you're ready, honey. Let me guess. Now, I haven't clicked on this before, but let's see what we have. An ESL teacher for 3 years and 3 months. Profile is locked. Imagine that. What, leftist feminist philosopher. That's kind of interesting. That's kind of lives in Seoul, Korea, February 20. So you're a teacher for like 3 years teaching English. Okay, yeah, oh, that doesn't really do anything. Photos. Let's see, do we lock profile, check-ins? What are we checking in here? Renaissance Festival, that's about it. What do we end up saying? That's what we got. That's Korean, I'm assuming Korean ancestry, so we got that there. Obviously, somebody doesn't know the difference between statements and questions. Why? What good will it do? What good will it do? What good? What good will that do? What benefit will this have for South Koreans or anybody for that matter? But yeah, she's stupid people. Here somebody says that Lee is bringing back DPRK propaganda while at the same time censoring and threatening conservative news media. And it's just not conservative news media. It sets a dangerous precedence in the fact that you will have people that whoever, if this is put into law and the following, if somebody else comes into power and they wield the reins of government, now they can classify anything that they don't like as hate speech. Yeah. I don't know. It's case studies and academic social investigatory intrigue. A society needs to make sure it's strong enough for exposure to propaganda and not safe enough to never be exposed. This is kind of like, I don't know, I disagree with that because when you kind of make that statement, it's kind of like saying, well, you know, you need to inject yourself with harmful substances and drugs so that way you can have an immunity against those drugs. So you need to start shooting up drugs. That makes zero sense. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And this guy Mitchell even goes to the point of where he said, why the hell should anyone in the South be restricted from reading these? And there's a good reason why. And I'm going to tell you, you need to read up on how propaganda was used before, during, and after the Korean War. It was massive. And it doesn't happen from just reading it once, like that alley person said. They clearly it's part of a vehicle used to destabilize countries, peoples, create division, and so on and so forth. The fact that hundreds of thousands of people were enticed to follow Kim Il-sung should be enough to outlaw North Korean propaganda. By the way, it is outlawed per National Security Article 7 right there. Those that want to do away with this law can give zero reasons why this would be good for South Korea. And again, it's interesting because when you ask this question, people can't come up with a good reason why. They can't. Now, if North Korea reciprocated and allowed its citizens to read South Korean newspapers, I might see that as a reason, but that is not the case. And that's what we end up seeing is I'm all for unification. I'm all for reaching across the aisle. I'm all for reuniting families, which there are still families that are separated between North and South Korea. Most of them have died out, but there's still some families that were separated during the Korean War. I can't remember the last time off the top of my head when they did a meeting between those South Koreans and North Koreans that were families that were split up during the war. But if you see some of the past shows where they document that, oh my gosh, it hurts. That is just crazy. Parents, kids, brothers, sisters, aunts, uncles, family members, the whole nine yards, cousins, separated decades and decades. And it ends up, But in North Korea, what they end up doing is they show that, but they say, look how magnanimous we are and how awesome we are. We fought to the tooth and we forced South Korea to let these South Koreans see their family members in the North. And it took everything we had, and look how successful we are reuniting. So they put the spin on it 100%, 180 degrees. It's all them. South Korea says, hey, but in reality, they all work together to get these things done, but North Korea ends up using it as propaganda. And as somebody who's in the military for over 20 years, and I spent a considerable amount of time here in Korea, I've seen North Korean propaganda. I found North Korean propaganda as I was serving here in Korea during the military. Some of that was up on the DMZ. So, in other parts of Korea, I found North Korean propaganda leaflets. And, it's definitely a thing. It is not good. Okay. So again, the interesting thing is why the hell would anyone in the South be restricted from reading North Korean propaganda? Korea War. If you do a deep dive into all of the components and how all that came to be, propaganda was one of those huge things that enabled that to happen. And it was communist, propaganda that came initially from Stalin and Lenin and all those people, in Russia, and then it filtered into the Asian countries, and then you had China, and then you had the communist revolution and the whole 9 yards, and killing hundreds of millions of people. And then, Kim Il-sung's like, hey, I can make some money off of this deal. So he jumped on the communist propaganda bandwagon, took hundreds of thousands of people with him to join him, and that divided an entire country. I don't know. I'm just going to go out on a limb and say propaganda is a dangerous thing, especially here in Korea, and especially when the laws on the book at this time, according to Article 7 of the National Security Act, Korean propaganda is illegal. Remember that. So for little Miss What's-Her-Face, Ali Han, it's, who's been an ESL teacher for 3 years. Oh, I bow down to your education, what is probably sorely lacking. I don't know. That's all I'm going to go out and say. Let's see. We'll catch up on some comments here. We got Mad Nick. He pops in and says howdy. Hey, chatted with him recently. Verithus says a real ID doesn't verify you're a citizen, though. What am I doing? Okay. Sorry, I'm pressing buttons I shouldn't be pressing. I need to get this back up to speed. So, seriously? Wilson, why are you pressing all these buttons? Okay, there we go. It doesn't verify that you're a citizen, though. It only the enhanced one, which is only available in like five blue states. Yeah, real ID. But the interesting thing is we'll go off on a detour of how every single Democrat voted against having, voter ID or an ID to vote, are the ones that to vote and voted down had to produce an ID proving who they were so that they could actually vote on that in government. I know, it's just weird. Anyway, Mad Mick says, looks like a burner page for somebody who just wants to argue online all day. Yeah, could be. Corsair the Pirate, he says, got time for a tax question? I don't know, I might. Let's dig into that. Let's go down another off-ramp, and we'll go down this road a little bit. Should be easy. What state do you claim, or do you? How does one handle that when in Korea? This is an interesting question, and one I've had a couple other people email me and ask me. Because I'm an American citizen, I will always be an American citizen, as far as I know. I don't reside in the United States. My permanent residence is here in Korea. So when I lived in Colorado and I sold everything, I contacted the Department of Revenue and I asked them a question. I said, hey, do I have to pay state taxes because I am no longer a resident? And I said, I understand if I move to Montana, Alaska, New York, whatever. If I move to some other state, I will pay taxes if that state requires me to pay state taxes, and I wouldn't have to pay Colorado tax. I am never coming back to Colorado. My permanent residence here in Korea. Do I need to pay Colorado state tax? I got an email back from the Department of Revenue of Colorado saying no, because you're permanent residents, and they said the exact same thing. It's like if you moved to another state and your primary residence was there, you are not liable for Colorado state tax or being taxed. So I don't have to file taxes in Colorado, so I don't have to pay state tax at all. I haven't paid state tax in the last 3 years. So I confirmed that with the Department of Revenue of Colorado, and I also confirmed it with our tax person, H&R Block. So I don't pay state tax. So that's how that's handled in Korea. I would suggest whatever state you're from, if you're planning to come to Korea like we are, and you're going to have permanent residence in Korea and not in the state that you were left, you have no controlling interest or properties or anything in that state, get with your State Department and ask them and say, hey, I understand if I move to another state, I don't have to pay state tax. If I move and I'm a permanent resident of Korea or another foreign country, do I have to pay state tax? I'm going to go out on a limb and I'm going to say probably no, unless you're in California or New York. Maybe I know they don't, but it wouldn't surprise me if those places, if California said, no, you got to pay state tax. That's how that's handled. I don't even claim a state, so I don't pay state tax. Corsair, the pirate, said they will go off for whatever state ID unless you seek domicile like Delaware with no state tax. It goes off of whatever state your identification is established in. Actually, that's not true, because as a military service member, I had a driver's license from New Mexico, and when I lived in Tennessee or Washington State or in California, I had to pay the state tax of the state that I was a primary resident in. It doesn't matter what my driver's license says. Doesn't matter what the ID is. So I had a driver's license from New Mexico, but I lived in Tennessee. I had to pay Tennessee tax. Again, the same driver's license. I lived in Washington State. I had to pay Washington State tax. I lived in California. I had to pay state tax there, even though I had a New Mexico driver's license. Being in the military, you move around a lot, and that's a thing. So yeah, it's based on your primary residence. If your primary residence, according to the last tax person I talked to, and of course the Colorado Department of Revenue, for Colorado, that's all I know about, they said, no, you don't have to pay that. Doesn't matter that my driver's license is, I still have my Colorado driver's license. Doesn't matter. I don't pay state tax. But then again, I could have a Colorado driver's license and live in Nevada, and I wouldn't pay Colorado tax because I live in my primary residence would be in Nevada. Trust, but verify. So verify that. Corsair the Pirate says, so I'm about to be a high tax Virginia. Oof. So should I move to Florida a week and get an ID so I can live there and then move to Korea? No. Again, check with the Department of Revenue. Check with a tax attorney, a tax preparer, or somebody, because this whole thing of just get an ID and you're going to be taxed on that state just because you have that state ID, that's not a thing. Going off another off-ramp, Fairth says, I have no problem with voter ID, but then you need to make it free to obtain one. 100% true. I am right there with you. I think you need to prove who you are. If senators and representatives and government officials that cast votes within our government are required to have an ID to identify who they are, to be able to vote on legislation, you should have to produce an ID showing that you are indeed American citizen in order to vote. I have to use an ID to drive, to get a firearm, to get prescriptions, to get a litany of other things in the United States. It is required to have an ID, but suddenly people are saying, no, you can't do that. You can't do that. Oh, the poor African Americans, they won't be able to vote. That's laughable. I don't, we're in 2026. When I was in the military way back in the day, in 1985 to 2005, every single minority had an ID. So driver's license, state ID. I don't understand where all that is coming from. Matt Mick says Maryland may start FEIE still. Check Virginia law to see if they will do that. I would be careful. Check. Corsair says my sister lives in Colorado. Maybe I'll move there. Getting an ID doesn't matter where your ID's from. When I had an ID, a driver's license from New Mexico, and I lived in Tennessee, I didn't pay New Mexico state tax. I paid Tennessee tax because my primary residence was Tennessee. Corsair says, be retiring in Korea. Yeah, don't worry about an ID. Just make sure you get an up-to-date driver's license that's good. Usually they're good for 10 years before you come to Korea. So that way, you can exchange that for a Korean driver's license. And then there's ways that you can keep your U.S. driver's license at the same time. I've talked about that in previous videos. But yeah, check with the Department of Revenue. That whole get an ID with another state thing is not a thing. Mad Nick said, okay then, disregard me. Yeah, it's just something, it's not saying anything bad, it's just a little misinformation. Was it your primary residence because you own property through there? Dun, dun, dun. Terry says, I just sent you an email about family reunification. Ferrithus brings up and says, you only pay state tax in the U.S. if you live in that state for 183 plus days a year. If I make money in New York and live in Florida, I don't pay state taxes if I can prove that I'm in New York less than 183 days. Corsair, so where do you vote if you do? I can vote. I can vote in federal elections, but I don't vote in state elections because I'm not a primary resident of that state. So, yeah. But that residency thing, let me look that up. We'll grok it. Let's grok it and see what happens. What is the requirement for primary residence for state tax purposes? So we'll kind of hit this up and we'll see what happens. So we'll do the grok thing. It'll take a few seconds. We'll see how it goes. Dun 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 dun. Ferrith says, well, speaking of medical earlier, as we were waiting for grok, doctor sent me another bill, which I already paid for, their third mess up, trying to bill them more than I owe. Something's wrong for the office. Yeah, imagine that. Corsair says you can just request a federal vote. Yeah, you can do, yeah. According to grok, what we end up seeing is, let's see if we can get this on screen. And again, take grok with a grain of salt or any AI generated, because there are some things that just won't be true. The concept of primary residence, often tied to domicile, is a key factor in determining your state tax residency, which affects how your income is taxed. States generally tax residents on their worldwide income, while non-residents are taxed only on income sourced within that state. Requirements vary by state. And it talks about domicile, where you own or rent your primary home. Again, it comes back to permanent residency. Voter registration, driver's license, and vehicle registration. But here's the interesting thing: is that here's something that I would say that isn't true because, like for example, I had a New Mexico driver's license. I had a vehicle that was registered in New Mexico, and voter registration was in New Mexico. I joined the military. I then went from New Mexico, and for example, like when I went to Washington State, even though I had voter registration, driver's license, and vehicle registration in New Mexico, because my primary residence, and I lived there in Washington State, I paid Washington State taxes. Same thing when I went to Fort Campbell, Kentucky. Actually, it was Clarksville, Tennessee. So when I lived in Tennessee, because I was stationed in the military, I still had voter registration, driver's license, and vehicle registration from another state, but I had to pay the state taxes of Tennessee. So again, take the AI answers with a grain of salt because there's more nuance to this. Location of family, employment, bank accounts, professional licenses, addresses used on federal tax returns and other tax documents, property ownership where you spend the majority of your time. That would probably be a thing. And this is what Ferrithus was talking about, and this is true. Many states classify you're a resident if you maintain an abode and spend more than 183 days over half a year there, even if your domicile is elsewhere. This can lead to dual residency and potential tax in multiple states through tax credits or treaties, which is often offset so you don't get double taxation. So yeah. And Colorado, you're a Colorado resident if you're domiciled in your state, your permanent home is here with the intent to remain, or if you meet statutory 6-month rule. So again, evidence of intent, driver's license, voter and vehicle registration, school enrollment, property ownership, residence, spouse, family, employment, business in the state, all of that, that doesn't apply because, yeah, even though I've got a Colorado driver's license or ID, even though I had voter registration, I don't have any of this other stuff. But again, this comes down to the part of where it's like people hear something or they don't know all the information, and then it becomes, well, if you have an ID, from that state, you have to pay state taxes. Well, there's more variables that are involved, the totality of circumstances, and again, what Ferrithus brought up was the 6-month rule, that 183 days or whatever it was, is one of the biggest ones there. But since I do not live any amount of time in Colorado, again, the Colorado Department of Revenue sent me an email and said, nope, yep, you permanently reside somewhere else, so it's on them. So if I had to pay taxes here in Korea, I would pay taxes in Korea, but I don't. There's no state taxes in Korea. So whatever sales tax, I do that. But yeah, there's no separate state tax like we did with the Colorado state tax. So yeah. Nefer Demur says, greetings, Steve. Nice to see you again on Propaganda. Edward Bernie's book is an excellent read. The concept of gaslighting is interesting as well. Ooh, cool. That could be interesting. Such a deep hole that you could go down. Mad Mick says, different AIs give you different answers as well, sometimes at least. Yeah, they do. There's things that I've looked up on ChatGPT and Grok, which has been 100% wrong. My wife a number of times has found and asked, she likes ChatGPT, but it's been wrong a number of times, and my wife will argue with ChatGPT. They'll say, hey, here's the answer to your question. My wife is like, no, that's not right, because here it is, and she copies and pastes. She's actually had ChatGPT apologize to her for giving her wrong answers. Yeah, that's weird. So, and my wife will type it, well, be sure that you remember this for next time, or with anybody else. Yes, we will, or I will, or whatever. Yeah, weird. Netventive says, I live in Florida, but I work across the U.S. The general rule is when you need to report each state income earned when physically in that state, again, over a certain amount. Yeah, that's that whole thing. Nev says, oops, gaslighting. Yep. I had them give me answers, then change the answers the next day. Yeah, I've had that. I've had them do it on physical fitness stuff as well and nutrition. So that's kind of funny. It's kind of like, no, wait, yesterday you told me something different. Oh, I'm sorry, blah, blah, blah. Well, this is new information that I found, blah, blah. So it's always some type of excuse. It's kind of funny. So yeah, there's a lot of things. And the one thing that most AI, ChatGPT or Grok or whatever, it says if you're dealing with multiple states or taxes, consult a tax professional or relevant state revenue department to clear up any issues. So yeah, rules change, verify with official sources like the Colorado Department of Revenue for the latest guidance, which is exactly what I did before we made the move here. So yeah, it is quite. And then after we got here, I was a little nervous, so I re-verified that information. I sent again an email to the Colorado Department of Revenue and asked them the same question, and they're like, "Yep, you're good to go." So I don't pay state tax. Yay! Saved a little bit of money. A little bit of money. So yeah, that's what we got going on. We looked at some interesting things. We went down took some off ramps and kind of ranted about some different things. We talked about undocumented children here in Korea. Again, our RIK stands for Retired in Korea. And we talked about Seoul Real Estate. We talked about Doctor Strike 2.0 is on the rise. Again, they ended up saying that the current administration wants to increase the number of doctors. And yeah, we had this is very important because for the last 27 years, anytime Korea has tried to increase the number of doctors, the Korean Medical Association has always boycotted, and it resulted in a strike. And the Korean government has always been they have never called their bluff. And this is what they said. They protested and they walked out of Tuesday meeting boycotting the vote for this administration's call to have like 3,300 or 3,400 new doctors over a period of time. But the KMA has said that never will we increase the number of doctors. They've throughout different administrations, they have always said that. So they're living up to their claim. So I think we're going to possibly see another strike if the government pushes it. Then we talked about North Korean propaganda and how some people are like, hey, there's a law here in South Korea that you can't have North Korean propaganda or disseminate it or anything. I don't know, something to do with the Korean War. Hundreds of thousands of people dying, that whole thing, and human rights abuses of North Koreans and death camps and the whole 9 yards. I don't know. Punishing 3 and 4 generations for something that you did, I don't know. I think propaganda is a bad thing, and I don't see the benefit of reading or allowing South Koreans to read North Korean propaganda or newspapers. What good does it do? And no one's been able to answer that. And there's no reciprocity with this, with North Korea being able to read South Korean newspapers or media. That's outlawed. You can go to prison for that in North Korea. So again, what is the benefit of that? It's just highly sus in my opinion. And then you have that crazy lady, the Ali Han, who said, oh, reading propaganda doesn't work when you read it. And I never said that. I only asked the question, why? Why would this be beneficial? And so the number of straw man arguments and people who don't know history are clueless as to why propaganda is bad and why it's almost like they don't know history. It's almost like they don't know about the Communist Revolution, Mao Zedong, Pol Pot, any of the, Lenin, Stalin, Kim Il-sung, and of course, everyone after him, Castro, Che Guevara, all of those people, and how propaganda came into being and how it has been used for corrupt and evil purposes. I don't know. It just blows my mind that somebody who's been teaching English in Korea for 3 years on an ESL certificate has suddenly knows all there is to know about propaganda. Then obviously doesn't even know the difference between a sentence and a question. So, ooh. And then what bothers me even more is you have grown-ass adults that are around my age that don't know why North Korean propaganda and allowing South Korea to read it would be a problem. Look, you underestimate the mass amounts of people who are ignorant and stupid and would follow a rock. Yeah, look at all the cults, the dangerous religious cults that have happened. The Jim Jones. Hey, let's go down. And they all drank the Kool-Aid, and we all know how that happened. And then, the number of crazy people. Oh, I'm God and this, and we're going to have aliens going to come pick us up. And, oh, by the way, we're going to meet them. You just need to drink this or shoot this or take this or whatever, and they all end up dead. People are stupid, generally. You haven't noticed that? And if you know that, you know why propaganda can be such a bad thing. But it's the stupid people that don't understand why. The fact that you even have to explain this these days is crazy. It's like it reminds me of the video of, you see I don't know how true it is, where it's got the mom, she's got the hot pan, and she's got the holders, because the pan is hot, and she's trying to hand the pot to her kid, and the kid's she goes, no, it's hot, and the kid's trying to grab it from the bottom. She's like, no, it's hot. It's like, that is an excellent depiction of how stupid we've come in the United States. Is like, well, give it to me. No, it's hot. It's going to burn your head. Well, give it to me. They don't understand. And that is the problem when you have such low standards in education and you don't teach history. Then you're doomed to repeat it. That is so true. And now we're getting to the point of where you have so many stupid kids for such a long time now, and now these stupid kids are stupid adults, and now they're making stupid decisions in business and government and so on and so forth, and it's truly going to end up being like that movie Idiocracy. It was a comedy set in the far future of how stupid people get, and it's just, you can find it free on YouTube. I highly recommend. It's got some rough comedy, it's raunchy, but it is now becoming a documentary. It is truly becoming a documentary. You have people today, grown adults, that can't count back change. It would just blow my mind. My wife and I would have so much fun. We go to Walmart in the States, and then the machines would go out, and it's like, well, just pay. Well, I can't do that because the machine no worky. And it's like, well, the drawer is already open. I'm giving you this much, so you give me this much in return. And the grown adult that is the cashier can't do basic math. Hell, there was grown adults that if something was $2.95, my wife would give $5 and they couldn't figure it out. They couldn't figure out how to do that on the machine. And then they had to call a supervisor over because my wife wanted a certain amount of change back. And so the supervisor comes, who thankfully was an old person, and said, yeah, just plug in 500, $5, and it will do the math for you. People can't do math anymore. Holy crow, they can't do math. They can't even parallel park right. They can't, they're eating Tide Pods, they're washing chicken with dish soap. It's just monumentally stupid, and the stupidity is growing within society, and those of us who have a couple of brain cells, we're horrified on what is going to become of the next generation. Because, propaganda's not bad. No. It's just like, oh yeah, I'm going to eat borax because it has health benefits. And it's like, holy crow. TikTok is going to be the death of us, I think. Yeah. We're all worried about Bill Gates and giving vaccines and decreasing the population. No, the population is stupid enough. It will eventually decrease on its own. It will. It truly will. Okay, that is enough. That is enough. Mad Mick says, that's why I'm not an addict active on Facebook. So many opinions I have to listen to all day based on propaganda. This is common here. The level of incompetence is insane. Hope it's better over there. Yeah, it is. Yeah. I mean, there is such... The cool thing about being and living in Korea and then having access to the local military base is I get to see the two dynamics. Take, for example, education. In education, and I'm at a latte, education is interesting because in Korea there is a high value on education. The standards are through the roof. They go to school for most of the day and they'll go to hagwons or learning clinics or centers to get additional tutoring in math, science, and whatever else. And sometimes that can go on until 9, 10 o'clock at night. And then you go home and do homework. My wife remembers doing that and having homework until midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning, then get up and go to school all day until 4 or 5 o'clock, and then go, that was the thing. Education, as Verithus says, is critical, and it ends up, when we look at the edge, they have a elementary, middle school, and high school on the military base. They don't even go to school for half a day. No. And there's passing periods between the classes that they take. So if they go for 6 hours and it ends up, it's not even a real 6 hours or 7 hours. There's no way. It's like 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and like 1:30 they're off. So you're looking like maybe 7 hours. But then you have a lunch period, so you got to knock off at least a half hour or something like that. And then you have the classes, and then you have the passing periods between them, 10, 15 minutes. So how much time are you actually in school? I've seen these kids on the base and sitting and we're eating and we're listening to these kids in the next booth. They're dumb as a bag of hammers. Now, granted, there are some that are smart, but I hear more stupid conversations and idiocracy than I do smart conversations. It blows my mind. It truly blows my mind. Never Demers says, the mind is truly a thing not to waste or let others waste. I know. Ferrithus says, standardized education across the country is critical. I don't like the Department of Education. I've been saying we should have gotten rid of the Department of Education in the United States for, good Lord, 30 plus years. Each state should have their own Department of Education. You don't need a federal department because that's just monumentally stupid. And with the advent of the Department of Education, we have seen neither math, science, or reading scores or any type of successful metric being raised because we had a Department of Education. So that tells me the Department of Education is basically useless in that regard, so we don't need to do that. Leave it up to the own states to standardize their education, and that will foster competitiveness, and states can make their own things. So in other words, state over here is like, hey, our standards are right here. And another state is like, well, hell, we need to be better. We're gonna be a little more competitive. Our standards are gonna be here. Another state might say, well, we're gonna be here. We're gonna be here. And through that competitiveness and high standards, there should be, now I kind of agree, there should be a standard level across the board. Reading, writing, arithmetic, hell, kids don't even know what arithmetic is these days. They can't count back change, let alone do advanced math. Most of our colleges in the United States, a lot of colleges have remedial classes because people can't do college level work anymore. You have people that will spend 1 or 2 years on remedial classes before they start any college level classes. So yes, I totally agree with Ferrithus. Standardized across the country is critical. I totally agree with that. But I mean, let the states have their own Department of Education. That's in my world. If I was a king, that's what I would do. We've had non-standardized ed in Germany for the longest time. It was a state matter. It was horrible. Poor states will always be behind the wealthy ones. It's not a competition. It's just money. I don't think that's true. And the reason I say this, now I'm not saying it's not true in Germany's situation and that you had some states that were better than others, but I don't think money is the sole variable that determines success or the reason why some states have high standards and others have low standards. If you look at the top 10 schools or the top 10 countries for math, science, reading, and all of that stuff, those countries pale in comparison in the amount of money that they spend on education compared to the United States and other countries. So wealth is not the main driving thing in attaining success when it comes to education in those areas. But I can see in the United States, let's go on the flip side of the coin, because that's how I roll. I can see in the United States where you have schools that didn't get a lot of funding versus schools that did get a lot of funding. But then there is also the standards were different. There are some schools that it's not always the case. They get more funding, but they have low standards. Yeah, that's the thing that happens too. It's not a set thing. So Neverton says, what you just stated about U.S. education system reminds me of the book on dumbing us down. As long as standardized education doesn't turn into indoctrination. Absolutely true. I think it should be based on facts, hard sciences, math, science, reading, all of those things, how to start a business, how to, do a budget, all of those things, social, learn about how our government works, history, Constitution, Bill of Rights, all of those things, how bills become law, the different, sections of government, departments of government that we have and how they all run. None of that is being taught today. That is zero. Ferrith says, it will especially be true in the U.S. All the low population density states will need so many more schools than high density states, so the money will be stretched far thinner. Yeah, in that regard. But that's also claiming that you can't have high standards if you don't have a lot of money, which isn't the case. You can have high standards because, like I said, in other countries, you have other countries where the amount of money that they spend on education is minuscule compared to what states in the United States pay. And yet these kids in those countries have high standards. Like, for example, my wife went to school. She stayed in, they didn't have janitors. The kids cleaned the classrooms. They emptied the trash. They cleaned the chalkboards. They did all that. They stayed in one classroom and the teachers rotated. They had some pretty poor, education facilities, but they had high standards with math, science, reading, English, and so on and so forth. She even learned some Japanese and stuff like that. So there was very high standards, even though there was a poor, or I shouldn't say poor, but the budget for education was really, really low. But that didn't keep them from having high standards in education. And so if you look at some of these Asian countries, my wife remembers living in a place that had dirt floors. And she went to school and the standards were high and it required homework. It required diligence and motivation and to do those things. So while she was poor and in a poor school here in Korea, they still had high standards. So that's where I would disagree with that. In the U.S., schools that were funded worse always have struggled hard, even within the same state. Now that's true, but that just tells me that the schools that have lower funding didn't man up and maintain high standards. They said, we're not getting funding, screw the standards. We're not getting paid. So why should the standards be high? Which is the exact opposite. Whoa, what was that teacher? Morgan Freeman played him. Freeman principal movie, Lean on Me. He was the notoriously strict principal for East Side High School in Paterson, New Jersey from 82 to 89 to enforce discipline and standards. And there's been other incidences of that as well. In Edward J. Olmos, he did the movie there, talking about schools and teaching and things like that. So there's been a lot of cases where schools that have been historically underfunded and their standards were low, and the teachers and the principals and the staff were just like, it doesn't matter, we'll just run them through. It's, we're not going to change these kids, which is exactly what, that Principal Joe Clark ended up. He was like, hell no. Just because we don't have money doesn't mean that we cannot have high standards and produce and educate students. But the problem is that we've associated that money with education for so long, that has become the norm that we believe, well, if you can't have high standards unless you're well funded. That logic doesn't fly when you look at these third world countries that have high education standards that are higher than the United States, and where you have schools where they actually have dirt floors. But they can conjugate sentences, they can do, algebra and calculus and trigonometry in high school, where our kids are struggling with basic math skills. Again, that dog don't hunt, I truly believe that you can have high standards and it's not dependent upon wealth and the influx of educational funding. And because of those situations that I said. Terry says, I graduated high school in 77 before the Department of Education and the U.S. We were number one in the world. Now, after DOE, we're around 40th. Exactly. The proof is in the pudding. And when you look at, even despite the low funding that we had back then, you were held to high standards. And like I said, I graduated high school in 85. But I remember going through school, middle school, junior high, high school, and the amount of work and the testing and the things that we had to know to go from one grade to the next is not the same. High schools, what I could do in middle school, high school students can't do today. And it's not because of funding or a lack of funding. Funding aside, you have a teacher, you have a classroom, you have students. 1 + 1 is 2. 2 + 2 is 4. X squared over Y pi, whatever the hell that you're doing. It's still a classroom, still a teacher, still students. If third world countries can teach their kids in dirt floor classrooms how to do algebra and trigonometry, and we can't even do that, with being supposedly the richest country in the world, it's not a money problem. Not a money problem. We think those two things are tied. It's become such the norm in the United States that we equate wealth and funding with educational standards that those things can never be separated, but they can. Case in point, homeschooling. I know homeschooling gets a bad rap. But it's interesting because I went to public school and private school, went to Catholic private school for a number of years. And then the interesting thing is I had 2 stepbrothers. They're like 12 and 14 years younger than me. My parents homeschooled them. They're smarter in areas of math than I was when I went through school. That's because my parents were pretty smart in math, and then they learned those things earlier than I did, and so they're smarter when it comes to math. They're dumb as a bag of hammers in a lot of other areas, but they're smarter in math, and they can read, and they've attained a high level of math, science, and reading going through homeschool, because there was what? There wasn't no huge funding. No, it was like made up materials. This was before recent times where you can get entire curriculums for homeschooling your kid during the year, with books and videos and the whole, this was all done by my parents. And they basically made up the criteria. They got textbooks from way back when, and they used that as teaching. And of course, my stepdad, he had a 4-year degree in forestry. He was really smart. And, I mean, it just, they were able to get educated with minimal amount of money. And they're successful human beings. Compared to what we have today, where you have the amount that it costs to educate a child today is astronomical, and they don't even know half of what I know. And I was an okay student. I'm not saying I was an A plus. No, I was a B minus C plus student. That's what I was. Kids, a lot of kids today. Yeah. Okay, let's get to some comments. Nefertib says, what's the difference between a developing country and a so-called third world country? I don't know. Can a third world country be a developing country? I've never actually heard that phrase, developing country. I think they're developing as a country over time. I think a third world country can be a developing country as long as they're making progression with its government, its citizens, its education, taking care of its citizens, how they treat people, human rights, values, all those things. I think that can be a thing. Mad Mick says they're learning calculus and history. Our kids are learning pronouns and racism. We don't even have history in school anymore. Yeah, I remember when I went through school, you had world history, the entire world history, and then you had history of the United States, before the Civil War, after the Civil War, current history, we went through everything. I mean, these days, nothing. Ferritus says a third world country is an outdated term from the Cold War era. A developing nation is tied to economic development of a nation. China was a developing nation when I was a teenager. Yeah, that makes sense. It seems like it's it's kind of the same. You could be a third world country. It just means that you're not as advanced as first world countries who have been developed and advanced in education, industrialization, and health, medical, the treatment of its citizens, all of those things that lead to longer life expectancy and better quality of life, and everything in between there. So I think a developing nation, I think it's just a nicer way of saying a third world nation, third world country that is growing and progressing. But then you have countries that are third world that are not progressing or developing at all. So does the third world still mean still rough? Might be. Mad Mick says, love history, yeah. Parenthesis says, third world country was referencing political alignment in the Western world, the first world. Oh, yeah, that's right. Okay, okay. All right, never mind. Wow. Talk about, I forgot about all that. That just, things are starting to run through my mind. And that's why it's outdated. It comes to mind now. But regardless, you have developing nations and or third world countries that their education and the students that they're producing are more educated than the United States, which is supposedly one of the world superpowers. And our education stats are going down, and theirs are climbing or high already. Let's see, what are the top 20 nations for reading, science, and technology? Dun, dun, dun. Based on the 2023 to 2025 Student Performance Educational Systems, the Global Innovation Index, we can see top 20 nations. I can't get the France is 20th, but I can't get the whole list on 20, so we'll just do 19th. 19. Oh, no, I can. Hold on a second. Dun, 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 dun. And we'll throw this on the page here. We'll see what we can get. So we have Singapore, Switzerland, Japan, South Korea, Sweden, United States, Denmark, Finland, Netherlands, United Kingdom, China, Germany, Canada, Ireland, Taiwan, Estonia, Hong Kong, Australia, Japan, and France. Wow. So, what about math? That was another one that I wanted to take a look at. And for regions for math, this will be an interesting one. Again, the same type of thing. Throw this onto the page here. Boom. And we end up for the top in math, Singapore, Macau, Taiwan, Hong Kong, Japan, South Korea, Estonia, Switzerland, Canada, Netherlands, Ireland, Belgium, Denmark, United Kingdom, Poland, Austria, Australia, Czech Republic, Slovenia, Finland, and the United States is not even there. Oops. 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 Oh no. What have we done? And again, I would have to agree with the Department of Education didn't help us with education. Oh, yeah. See. Based on recent global rankings, top nations for education consistently include South Korea, Japan, Singapore, and Nordic countries like Finland. Recognized for high literacy, STEM performance, student-focused approaches, while U.S. and U.K. lead in higher education, while East Asian nations dominate in testing. So, yeah. So 20 nations in student education, we're looking at, and we'll throw this one up there. This is kind of an interesting little one. I used to have a thing where I had all of these in, so we got South Korea, top performer in literacy, tech, often ranked number 1, and Japan, Singapore, Finland, Germany, Denmark, Netherlands, United Kingdom, United States. But that's top ranked in universities. Now the problem is if you look at universities, you might say, yay, United States is number 9, yay. But then if you look at what universities are teaching now, it's garbage. It's just really, so really, is that a good metric to kind of throw up there? Is yay, we've got universities, but when you look at what the universities are teaching and the standards that we have within those universities, they're often lower than what they were even for high schools back in, the 40s and 50s. So, and then we got Canada, Belgium, Slovenia, Sweden, Norway, all of those, China, New Zealand. Yeah. So, the whole education thing, I don't think it's dependent upon money. Problem in the U.S. is that you have a few shining stars, no broad coverage. Exactly. Yep, Sweden, Norway, Finland, they're usually up there. And yeah, it just, Fun stuff. Let's see. Let's see if we can come up with something else up here. How much does South Korea and the USA spend on education, education per student average? We'll see how that goes. Let's see if we get an answer on this. The United States generally spends more per student than South Korea. They'll spend over $15,000 to $16,000 per pupil in higher education costs exceeding $37,000. In South Korea, $19,000 per student across all levels with higher spending on secondary education. So, yeah. And then it's just not a money problem thing. It's also a thing of you're paying for education, but what are you paying and what are you getting in return for that money? Again, if you look at the United States and you look at the education system, I even saw it in my daughter's own education. My daughter's a doctor. So but even in her public education system, in her public education, she wasn't taught history, so I taught her some history. You know, she wasn't taught about the Constitution. I taught her about the Constitution, the way that our government works. There's things that she wasn't being taught in the public education system. And let's see, we were in Tennessee. We were in, of course, Colorado. There was that. Of course, we came back to Korea, going to the military school on base. There was things that she wasn't being taught that we were teaching our daughter. So even though military education, military schools usually have some pretty good standards, they're still lacking in compared to the education that I got when I went through. So I just passed that on to my daughter. So, Ferrith says, well, what is the cost of living in South Korea compared to the U.S.? Yeah, that's another variable that comes into play. But just for education as a whole, and it's, I don't know, I don't think housing's in there. Let me see if I can try to find something with this. Dun, dun, dun. Dun. U.S. ranked among the highest globally, spending roughly more than other countries. So the United States are going to spend way more money than other places, definitely than Korea. But that amount of money that you're paying for the education for a student in the United States, the return on that investment is not that we have higher rankings in math, science, reading, comprehension, and all those things. We're actually lower on the list. So is really throwing money at the problem, fixing the problem? No, it's raising the standards, meeting the standards. And now we have schools, there are schools that say, well, we don't have grades. We just have pass or fail. What? Oh, somebody said, let me see if I can find that. New California. Of course, you know it's California. It's going to be school grading system percentages. It's called equitable grading, and it replaces the traditional 0 to 100 scale. So if you go to school and you do a test and you get 100%, yay, you got an A+. With a 0 to 50 scale, meaning 50% is the minimum grade for work. This is exactly what I'm talking about. So it talks about, and it says, this equitable grading in districts like Alameda and San Francisco. Key changes include allowing 80% plus to earn an A, potentially enabling a 21% to pass with a D, and removing late penalties for work. That is just so crazy. I don't know. But I've seen in my own life, now some people say that, that's not real, blah, blah, blah. Let me see. If I think I pulled this one up. If I got this in my history, let me see if I can find this. Here it is. Because people ended up, in another conversation I had, people were saying, no, that's absolutely true. Snopes said it wasn't true and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, no, this is from the website here. If we can take a look at this. This is the Alameda Unified School District, and it talks about how they're doing this in the fall. The grading policy includes minimum proportional grading. So this is that. Snopes says, no, this isn't a deal, or it's a thing. It's this method replaces the 1 to 100 and goes with a 50 to 100. And so an F can be anything from 0 to 59, where all other grades, D to an A, span only 10 points. This makes recovering from an F extremely difficult. But again, I don't know. It just, equitable grading. It just, and I've actually seen it in the schools that my daughter has gone to, where their grading system was changed by the teachers themselves. They didn't follow the policy dictated by the school. This happened in a public school. So when we had the parent-teacher conference and we went, and it's like, well, hey, our daughter got this grade, and it's like, this doesn't make sense because our daughter was an A student, big focus on education, and, we would do extra education during the summer. We just didn't let her brain rot into oblivion during the summer. She would do the next year's schoolwork during the summer, granted not the entire year, but it was enough for her to get mostly A's in all the grades that she went to. Well, the one public school that we went to ended up saying, well, she ended up getting a B minus or something like that. And it's like, well, wait a second, how does that happen? How did she get a B minus? How did she, and the teachers, we based it a grade. And it's like, no, I've seen all of her papers that she brings home from school. They're all A's, except for one, she got a C. But all of the tests were A's, everything was an A. And it's like, if you do the math and you average it out, she should have gotten an A. Not an A plus. She would have gotten an A, maybe an A minus. If you took a couple grades and put more emphasis, saying, well, this weighs more than other students who got similar grade, So again, it would be unfair grading practices. So by doing the math, it ends up, it's like, this is impossible. And the teacher's like, well, I wanted to, and she went on this whole thing for like 5 minutes, and it's like absolute dribble. And it's like, you're not following school policy. She should have gotten an A. By the math, the number of assignments, the number of tests, and how you said this all works, she should have at least gotten an A, maybe an A minus at the worst. But you gave her a B minus. And she was this new age, whatever, feminist teacher thing. And she's like, well, which was weird because my daughter's a girl, female. So you think there would be some preference there, but there wasn't, obviously. And she had this weird thing of where, she just made up in her own mind that she's going to give her a lower grade. That was the last year she went to that school. And then we took her to a charter school so we didn't have to put up for that bullshit. So, yeah. I've seen it happen in my own lifetime, but now we're getting things where they're changing grades. And then the fact that even areas or counties and areas that have grades that still do 90 to 100 as an A, you got kids that can't read. You have high schoolers that graduated high school that can't read at a middle school level. But they're shuffled through. So again, going back, even if you just have high standards, it doesn't mean that's going to result in education in well-educated children. It's not. I live in Pueblo, Colorado. The grade standards were normal, high, but you had some of the dumbest kids on the planet. They couldn't read, but yet they graduated every single year and they graduated high school, but they could not read a newspaper. They could not understand what a paragraph said. They couldn't tell you that this sentence, whether it is a statement or a question. They couldn't diagram on what was a noun, a verb, or an adjective, the Barney basic things. They couldn't do that. They couldn't read. They couldn't comprehend reading. It from the page to their mind, they would have to have somebody tell them and explain it to them to understand that. Pueblo, Colorado was like, it was at one time, if I'm not mistaken, it was the place in the United States that had the highest teen pregnancy rates in all of the U.S. Yeah, I was sweating bullets when we were there. I kept a close eye on, and educating our daughter and making sure that it was good. And we're not going to get mixed up in that stupidity. You're going to get a good education. These are not your friends. The people in school are not your friends. You, for the most part, we will move and you will never see them again. So don't take on the idiocy of what they are doing and what they're not studying. And you look back and a lot of the kids end up in drugs and prisons and gangs and the whole 9 yards. And so even though the grading scale was still good and they graduated, they ended up being horrible people. So there's more to education than just grades, is what I'm saying. It's not dependent on just on money. It's not dependent upon this or, it's better with a, mom and a dad together. Sometimes it is, but if you got crappy parents, then it's not, Sounds like one group learns how to think, the other learns what to think. Yeah, and that brings up the point. There's nobody learns how to think critically anymore. Nobody learns logic. Nobody. I taught logical fallacies and all that stuff to my daughter and critical thinking and all this stuff, and to know when somebody's trying to pull the wool over your eyes, straw man arguments, appeal to authority, all of those things. I pass those things on to my daughter because the schools don't do it anymore. And if you keep the populace ignorant, then they can't rise up against you. And the politicians continue to be corrupt and stupid and take advantage of its citizens because with a dumbed down populace, they don't know what they don't know. And it's easier to pull the wool over their eyes. It's easier to pull one over. It's easier to be corrupt. It's easier to misdirect taxpayer funds to line their own pockets and to make politicians rich. Yeah, that's the thing. Crazy. Okay, so anyway, that's what we got going on. We're doing some fun stuff. Yeah, here in Korea, and we talked about the world's problems, but we hit up the big things here that we saw here in Korea and all that stuff and more, and went off we took the off ramp into rant world and We ran that up pretty good, rallied against the crazy education systems and what we're not getting and what we can be getting, what we could be getting. I don't know. I think the United States is heading towards idiocracy as a documentary than rather a comedy. So it's just a matter of time. Watch it. Watch Idiocracy, and you will see it, and you'll see the parallels in the United States, and you're going to be like, holy crap, this is becoming a self-fulfilling prophecy. It is. It truly is. Alrighty. It's 10:15. I am starving. I only had a latte, so I got to get some food, get some breakfast. Some people, you need to get some sleep. I don't even know what day it is. What is it? Wednesday? Thursday? Yeah, it's Thursday. So it's Thursday. I've been at it. We got some stuff to do. I'm still doing some remodeling over here. If you can take a look at that. And yeah, we're doing some stuff, doing remodeling, all kinds of moving and changing stuff around. I do have some, what is it here? I got some cool little peel-in stick. And this is going to be on the desk over there. So we're going to have that dark background, and we're going to have this on the tabletop so it'll look all pretty. So we're going to do that, and that'll look nice. Let me see if will that show up on camera? Stay. And yeah, you can see a little bit of that there. That'll look a little bit nicer. So. Yeah. So anyway, that's going to be it for today. Ferrithus says, take care. Dinner time here. Breakfast here. Totally agree. Have fun. Thanks for the stimulating conversation. Sultan says, have a great one, Steve, and everyone else. Again, appreciate you all for tuning in. Appreciate the likes, the comments, going through all this information and kind of hammering stuff out. Yeah, it's a good time. I enjoy every single one of you out there. I'm really digging this. This is really good. So with that, the obligatory out time or outro, Mad Mick says it's sleepy time there. Yeah, I bet it is. And so we got a bunch of people at Bobby Coffee. If you want to do that, that's cool. Link in the description box. But honestly, the best thing that you could do is like the video, subscribe to the channel. That would really help me out, and I would appreciate that. Like Mick says, go ahead and have a good one. Ned Ventive ends up saying, have a great day, y'all. And I would mimic those same thoughts to you and yours until we see you on the next video. All right, we'll see you. Peace. Get smart.